Chapter 2062. Humph. Didn't I say that Fiery Fire Mountain is just repaying a debt of gratitude? They can't protect you forever. After all, you're a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. Since you were able to participate in the auction of nascent soul cultivators, your storage pouch must have been replaced with something that even golden core cultivators can't covet. These. I'm afraid they'll all change owners very soon. Yen Yu quietly flew up and laughed inwardly. If I didn't know your background, who would have thought that you, an early-stage foundation building cultivator, would actually have a storage pouch of a golden core cultivator? You can actually have something that nascent soul cultivators bid on. Although Xiaohua released his divine sense, he didn't expect that there would actually be people watching him in Haoming City. Therefore, he only focused on sizing up the surrounding scenery. The residence of Aura Refining Cultivators was the largest in Haoming City. Their Immortal's Cave was obviously much smaller than that of Foundation Building Cultivators. Moreover, it was also much more crowded. Although there were many spiritual plants, spiritual trees, and other things, they were a bit more common. Of course, there was also a difference: there were more city guards. The city guards wore armor and held long swords in their hands. From time to time, they would fly in the air in groups of 2s and 3s. Many Aura Refining Cultivators were also different from Foundation Building Cultivators. They didn't stay in their Immortals' Caves to meditate. Instead, they flew all over the mountain range like headless flies. Greetings, Senior. Just as Xiaohua's figure landed, several Aura Refining Cultivators greeted him. They respectfully saluted him and asked, "May I know which auction house Senior wants to go to?" "Junior is willing to serve." Xiaohua frowned slightly. He only knew the general situation of Haoming City, but he knew very little about the specific matters related to the auction. However, before he could speak, the expressions of those Aura Refining Cultivators changed slightly. They hastily cupped their hands and said, "Junior still has something to do. Junior will take his leave." "Huh? Why?" Xiaohua was even more baffled. When he raised his head to look, he saw several peak-stage Aura Refining Cultivators flying over. Obviously, those Aura Refining Cultivators were afraid of these city guards. "Greetings, Senior." The city guards also saluted respectfully. "May I know what Junior can help you with?" What's up with those Aura Refining Cultivators just now?" Xiaohua pointed his finger and said with a smile. The city guard said respectfully, "Senior, it's time for our Haoming City's once-in-a-century auction. Not only are there auctions for nascent soul cultivators, there are also auctions for gold core cultivators, foundation establishment cultivators, and chi refinement cultivators." I know that. Several auctions have started at the same time. I just came out of the nascent soul seniors auction with my seniors. I'm afraid that the auctions for Jindan, foundation establishment, and chi refinement cultivators have already ended. Senior's a trace of admiration appeared on the guard's face and he spoke with even more respect. "Senior went to the auction for nascent soul cultivators?" Say, S right, T. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't answer directly, the city guard said, "The number of nascent soul cultivators who come to Haoming City is limited, so the auctions have always been the shortest. The number of core formation cultivators, foundation building cultivators, and aura refining cultivators increases in turn, so the auctions are also divided into several places." Junior just received news that the auctions for core formation cultivators have already ended, but the auctions for foundation building cultivators and aura refining cultivators have yet to end. Good. Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "I want to go to the foundation building cultivators auction. Can fellow Daoist lead the way?" "Senior, please." The city guard didn't beat around the bush and extended his hand to signal Xiaohua. He then flew up first while the other city guards continued their patrol. Fellow Daoist, what's up with those aura-refining cultivators just now? Xiaohua asked again after flying for a while. Oh, it's nothing. The city guard seemed a little reluctant to answer. There are many cultivators who come to Haoming City, so it's hard to distinguish between good and bad. Many cultivators are embarrassingly short of money, so they start to do business with loose cultivators, causing a mess in Haoming City. Of course, those cultivators just now wouldn't have any ideas about foundation-building cultivators. However, they perhaps wanted to provide convenience for senior, or perhaps they had other plans. In order to prevent something unfavorable to fellow Daoists from happening, the city guards of Haoming City had no choice but to take action and suppress all the signs in advance. Oh, I see. Xiaohua nodded slightly. In just a short while, the city guard escorted Xiaohua to the front of a huge immortal's cave. This immortal's cave was no less than 10 times the size of Xiaohua's immortal's cave. At the entrance of the immortal's cave stood a dozen or so foundation-building city guards. When they saw Xiaohua and Xiaohua coming over, one of them flew over. The city guard who led Xiaohua here saluted this person and explained the matter. The city guard scanned Xiaohua with his divine sense and said with a smile, "According to the rules of Haoming City's auctions, you can't enter after the auction starts. However, since fellow Daoist has just come from the auction hosted by the city lord, I presume you still want to continue. How can I stop fellow Daoist's interest?" Fellow Daoist only needs to pay 100 high-grade spirit stones to enter. 100. Xiaohua was a little surprised. This number was indeed not much for him, but he had to pay 100 high-grade spirit stones just to enter. He had to admit that Haoming City was too greedy. Fellow Daoist, please know that ordinary foundation-building Daoists only need to pay 10 high-grade spirit stones. The city guard said very naturally. If you come late, you'll have to pay 10 times the amount. I understand. Xiaohua nodded and clapped his hands. Without blinking, he took out 110 spirit stones and said, "Fellow Daoist, please lead the way." The city guard scanned with his divine sense and naturally knew the number of spirit stones. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he put them into his storage bag. He said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist, please." After the city guard entered the immortal's cave, they turned into a pitch-black quiet room after passing through a few corridors. "Fellow Daoist, please. This secret room can isolate the probing of divine sense. Fellow Daoist, you can put on bewilderment and other items inside." The city guard stopped, handed over a number plate, and said with a smile, "This is fellow Daoist's number plate. After the auction, fellow Daoist can keep this number plate as a souvenir. Moreover, you can enjoy a discount in my Haoming City shops." "Many thanks." Xiaohua nodded and took the number plate. He didn't say anything else. He raised his head and walked in. He didn't put on any bewilderment, and when he passed through the quiet room, his figure and face had already changed. After Xiaohua passed through the quiet room, his eyes lit up. It was a huge immortal's cave, and thousands of cultivators were sitting in different positions in an orderly manner. In the center was a platform, and on the platform was a late-stage foundation-building cultivator. In front of that cultivator floated a jade tablet. The sound of bidding rose and fell in an endless stream. A smile appeared on Xiaohua's face. This was the auction that he was familiar with. Xiaohua scanned with his divine sense and sat down on the nearest seat. Just as he sat down, a plate of spirit fruits quietly floated next to the table. And, not bad. Xiaohua stretched out his hand without any trace of politeness, picked up a spirit fruit, and put it into his mouth. This was exchanged with 100 high-grade spirit stones, after all. TCH, this spirit fruit is really ordinary. Xiaohua casually ate a few mouthfuls, then swept his divine sense toward the high platform in the center. At this time, the auctioneer had already removed the silk on the jade plate. It was a precious refining material. In Xiao Hua's ears, there was already a foundation-building cultivator who called a relatively high price for this item. However, after seeing the auction of nascent soul cultivators, Xiao Hua felt that this auction of foundation-building cultivators was too childish. Xiao Hua was somewhat familiar with this material. It should be related to the repair of the cloud-suppressing seal. Therefore, Xiao Hua didn't even warm his seat before he immediately made a bid. Moreover, Xiao Hua was too ruthless. He increased the number of spirit stones by 30% all of a sudden. The several people who were still in full swing a moment ago immediately went silent. Good, the auctioneer said with a smile, if no one makes a bid, this Yunying stone is this fellow Daoist's. Immediately after, the auctioneer clapped his hand, and the Yunying stone on the jade plate disappeared. Then, a faint brilliance flashed on Xiao Hua's table, and the Yunying stone appeared on it. Not bad, Xiao Hua nodded secretly. With a wave of his hand, the Yunying stone was put into his space. Then, he placed the spirit stones inside it. When the brilliance disappeared, the spirit stones were also taken away. The legendary technique of Haoming City seems to be very detailed. There are traces of this technique everywhere. Xiao Hua thought of Daoist Master Yan Hong's methods during the nascent soul meeting. The dozen or so items that followed were all lacking in quality and were boring. Xiao Hua didn't care about them. But at this time, the auctioneer spoke again. Fellow Daoists, after more than 10 rounds of bidding, most of the items that fellow Daoists consigned for sale, as well as the items prepared by Haoming City, have been successfully sold. We'll take a break for now. If any fellow Daoist still wants to sell something, you can put it on the table in front of you. I have said this several times, but I still have to say it this time. When you sit down, the number plate on your body has already been connected with the magic array on the table. Fellow Daoist items also have the mark of the number plate, so there's no mistake. After the bidding, the spirit stones will still be sent to your table. Well, during the break, I will also put the items that failed in the previous bidding here. If any fellow Daoist likes them, you can still take them away. After the auctioneer finished speaking, he waved his hand. Dozens of jade boxes, jade bottles, magic tools, and other items were carried on jade plates and flew around the high platform. It was similar to the bidding that Xiao Hua had seen before. Then, the auctioneer stamped his foot again. At the edge of the high platform, a brilliance flashed, and a row of pitch-black magic tools was actually revealed, neatly placed there. There are even magic tools. Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback, but when his divine sense swept over, a trace of happiness appeared on his face. He saw that among the row of pitch-black magic tools, there was a magic spear end that was similar to the magic spear in his space, and it was placed there all by itself. In front of the spear end, there was a jade plate with the number of spirit stones written on it. Great, I didn't think I would actually be able to find this item here. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. Although he didn't know what kind of magic spear he could refine by putting the magic spear tip, shaft, and tail together, the magic spear tip was his earliest life-saving weapon. He still hoped to complete this magic spear. Seeing the auctioneer's body flash with brilliance and disappear from the high platform, several cultivators stood up from their seats and walked towards the high platform. The majority of the cultivators didn't care. They closed their eyes to rest, or took out something from their storage pouches, causing the entire hall to faintly flicker with brilliance. Chapter 2063. However, when Xiao Hua extended his hand to grab the tail of the demonic spear, a fair and jade-like hand also appeared in his field of vision. It was precisely grabbing the tail of the demonic spear. What made Xiao Hua very embarrassed was that the two of them were grabbing the tail of the demonic spear. Ha! Xiao Hua was stunned. This jade hand was obviously a female cultivator. When he turned his head to look, he saw a similarly short and thin woman looking at him with the same stunned expression. This. Xiao Hua wanted to withdraw his hand, but he didn't dare to. He was afraid that if he withdrew his hand, the female cultivator would take the devil spear away. Obviously, the female cultivator also had the same idea. She placed one hand on the devil spear and stared at Xiao Hua, unwilling to admit defeat. Fellow Daoist. Xiao Hua coughed. He looked at the somewhat pale early-stage Foundation establishment female cultivator and said, "Why didn't fellow Daoist bid a moment ago, but instead made a move now?" Fellow Daoist also didn't bid, so why did you make a move now? The female cultivator also questioned. I came too late. Xiao Hua touched his nose with his other hand and smiled bitterly. Then, he looked at the devil spear on the left and said, "There are so many devil spears on this high platform, why did fellow Daoist choose this one? Why don't you choose something else?" Yes, there are so many devil spears on this high platform, why did fellow Daoist choose this one? Why don't you choose something else? The female cultivator also said. Alas, Xiao Hua sighed. He suddenly raised his head, looked to the left, and shouted, "Manager, oh!" The female cultivator was stunned. She also raised her eyebrows and looked over, but at this moment, she suddenly felt her hand slip. The devil spear's tail that she was holding tightly was actually forcefully pulled away by Xiao Hua. She naturally grabbed with her hand, and Xiao Hua also felt a great force. She wanted to grab the devil spear's tail, but Xiao Hua used a little force and easily pulled the devil spear's tail away. However, Xiao Hua was still a little surprised. Looking at the thin and unremarkable female cultivator, he didn't expect this female cultivator to have such great strength. The female cultivator didn't see the empty high platform. She knew that she had been fooled. She hurriedly stepped forward, stretched out her hand, and used an extremely beautiful move to snatch the devil spear's tail away. But how could Xiao Hua let her have her way? He raised his left hand and swiftly struck her wrist. At the same time, he slapped his storage bag. Paw! Xiao Hua's fist struck the female cultivator's hand, which had quickly turned into a palm. At the same time, the devil spear's tail also disappeared from his hand. You! The female cultivator was stunned for a moment, but then her face turned as cold as ice. She coldly said, "Are you still a man? Is this how you treat a female cultivator?" Of course I'm a man. Ai's dual cultivation partner was the clearest about this. Fellow Daoist doesn't need to worry about me. Xiao Hua said with a smile, "As for the treatment of female cultivators, I don't have enough experience. Please forgive me if I've been rude." You. The female cultivator said the word "you" again. Then, she looked around and saw that there were already people paying attention to them. She stomped her feet and said angrily, "I already had my eyes on this item. How could you snatch it away from me?" "Oh. How about this?" Xiao Hua nodded. He looked at the high platform and said, "Since the ruler is here, let's let this devil tool bid again. I came late just now. Let's start again." This time, the female cultivator didn't fall for his trick. She sighed and said, "If I had spirit stones, would I have waited until now?" Xiao Hua smiled and pointed at it. "Isn't this the same as the starting price? You could have just bid at that time." The female cultivator looked at Xiao Hua with her starry eyes and nodded slightly. "Fellow Daoist, you really just arrived." Then, she explained, "The current bid is already 50% of the original price. In the previous rounds, it was 90% at the beginning, then 80% until now. I've always been afraid that someone would snatch it away. Now, I can finally afford to bid, but you snatched it away. Moreover, if you snatched it away from me, this item, I'm afraid I'd really have to bid again. The female cultivator said faintly. I've been looking for this item for a long time. I came to Bright City this time precisely for this item. Is this item very important to fellow Daoist? Xiaohua asked curiously. A trace of vigilance flashed through the female cultivator's eyes, and she asked, if I say it's important, can you give it to me? Xiaohua shook his head slightly. I don't know yet. At this moment, a brilliance flashed on the high platform, and Zai Qi's figure slowly emerged. Obviously, a new round of bidding was about to begin. Forget it. The female cultivator glared fiercely at Xiaohua, then turned around and left. Xiaohua shrugged, took out spirit stones, placed them on a jade plate, and slowly returned to his seat. Zai Qi went up to the high platform and glanced at the things floating around. Almost no one moved, but he remained calm and composed. He formed hand seals, and with a flash of brilliance, all the items fell on the high platform and disappeared. At the same time, the demonic tools on the edge of the high platform also disappeared without a trace. Alright, there's still 10 minutes before the last round of bidding. Fellow Daoist who still wants to consign something for sale, please hurry up. Zai Qi said with a smile. The items consigned by fellow Daoist will be appraised by my Haoming City's dedicated consecrators. It's absolutely fair. However, fellow Daoist must give 10% of the items to my Haoming City. Xiaohua sat on his seat, listless as he listened to Zai Qi's nonsense. However, his mind was thinking about that female cultivator just now. If this female cultivator was concerned about the demonic tools, it would be normal, but why did she care about the demonic spear's tail? Moreover, this female cultivator's strength isn't ordinary. She's the strongest cultivator I've ever seen. Oh. Xiaohua thought and placed the demonic spear's tip, shaft, and tail together. Sure enough, there was still a section of the spear shaft missing. So that's how it is. Xiaohua realized. This female cultivator should still have a section of the spear shaft, so she wanted to match it with the demonic spear's tail. Oh no, I offended that female cultivator just now. I'm afraid it won't be easy to get the demonic spear shaft. Is there any other fellow Daoist who wants to consign something for sale? Zai Qi finally asked. Xiaohua's heart suddenly moved. He took out a very damaged magic tool from the storage pouch he got from the golden core cultivator in the Inkcloud Black Forest and threw it on the table next to him. A brilliance flashed on the table, and the magic tool disappeared. That golden core cultivator must have gone to the Inkcloud Black Forest to pick up the items. Maybe he even picked them up for a long time. The items in these two storage pouches are strange. The jade slips are easy to understand, but the magic tools are troublesome. No matter how I look at them, I can't figure out their origins. Why don't I ask the Haoming City's consecrators to help me take a look? Xiaohua thought to himself as he watched the brilliance on the table disappear. Soon, the first items consigned for sale appeared in front of Zai Qi and were placed on several jade plates. Zai Qi pointed his hand and one of the jade plates flew in front of him. Zai Qi opened the silk cloth and scanned it with his divine sense. He laughed. Hee, I knew it. There are still some fellow Taoists who have good things but won't take them out until the last moment. The quality of this magic tool isn't bad. It's not much inferior to the magic tools in the previous auction. Chapter 2064. Soon after, Zai Qi quoted a number of spirit stones according to the price on the jade plate. Then, he gave a simple explanation of the magic tool's function and origin. And, it's really not bad. Xiaohua naturally had no interest in this magic tool, but after listening to Zai Qi's tireless explanation of the magic tool's ins and outs, and hearing that the price was appropriate, he couldn't help but nod inwardly. This magic tool obviously caused a small stir. Many foundation establishment cultivators began to slowly bid, and the number of spirit stones increased. This made Xiaohua puzzled. It can't be, right? No matter what, it's just a magic tool. Everyone here is a foundation establishment cultivator. Even if they don't have one, won't their sect give one? Why must they compete like this? But then, Xiaohua understood. Although the sect would give magic tools, it also depended on the sect. Not to mention the state of Shi's 3 cultivation sects, the Imperial Thunder sect and the Rinsing Flowers sect might be able to give each of them one. But the problem was, what about the other sects? At least Xiaohua knew that the previous Heartwarming didn't have this strength. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that these foundation establishment cultivators were bidding for these magic tools for their own juniors. Thinking of his juniors, Xiaohua was a bit worried. He had promised his eldest senior brother that he would give Xiang Zhili a great magical ability, but what magical ability? How would he explain it when the time came? Soon after, Zai Qi bid for many other strange things, but Xiaohua didn't care. What he wanted was a cultivation method for refining the body or tempering the bones. His space didn't lack these odds and ends. Alright, this old man has another good thing here. Zai Qi clapped his hands in disappointment. The silk covering the jade plate was removed, and a light cyan jade slip appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Cultivation method. Xiaohua's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but straighten his back slightly. His movement wasn't obvious, but in the eyes of a certain person, it was clear. This jade slip doesn't record any cultivation method, nor is it about refining tools or creating talismans. Zai Qi looked at the jade slip in his hand and said with a smile. Oh, everyone was disappointed, and Xiaohua even sat down. However, this is also a special item that appeared in my auction today. Zai Qi seemed to be whetting everyone's appetites. After a short pause, he continued, this jade slip contains a description in the Devil Realm's language. This is something that is rarely seen in auctions in Haoming City. Tisk, a cultivator sneered rudely. Senior, you're exaggerating. What do we not have at the auction in Haoming City? Even if the written descriptions in the demon realm were scarce, what was the use? We are not demonic cultivators, nor can we wield demonic artifacts. What use do we have for this thing? Hee, fellow Daoist, please calm down. Zai Qi looked at the cultivator whose cultivation was lower than his and didn't get angry. He said, I only said that this thing was rare, I didn't mention the price. Oh. However, as the manager spoke, he was a bit stunned. He scratched his head and said self-deprecatingly, I was wrong. This item was actually set by the fellow Daoist who put it up for sale. And the price isn't low. As he spoke, the Chancellor spoke a number that was definitely not low. Is there something wrong with this guy? The cultivator who spoke muttered, which foundation establishment cultivator would take out so many spirit stones for this thing? However, before he could finish speaking, a voice said, I want it. When everyone's divine senses swept over, they found that the person who spoke was Xiaohua. At this moment, Xiaohua was overjoyed. It was really like someone giving him a pillow when he was feeling sleepy. Wasn't he lacking a jade slip that could read thousands of characters in the demon realm? Sick. When the cultivator saw that an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator like him actually stood up to bid, he could only shake his head and sit down. Xiaohua stood there with a smile. He was a bit impatient. He knew very well that although the price of the spirit stones just now was lower than the previous magic tools and medicinal pills, it was definitely not low for this kind of almost useless jade slip. It could even be said to be very high. Who would bid against him for this? Moreover, Xiaohua didn't think that there were many cultivators present who had more spirit stones in their storage pouches than he did. However, without waiting for him to stand for a moment, without waiting for the Chancellor to ask another question, he heard a clear voice laughing not far away. Sure enough, fellow Daoist knows his stuff. I have no choice but to raise the price. Ha! It's actually that female cultivator just now. Xiaohua was stunned at first, but after a sweep with his divine sense, he immediately understood. This female cultivator also wants the demon tool, so of course she wants this jade slip. Immediately, Xiaohua raised the price without hesitation. And that female cultivator also seemed to be determined. She added spirit stones bit by bit. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the price of this jade slip had reached an extremely high level. However, Xiaohua was still indifferent. This number of spirit stones was still very low. However, hearing that female cultivator's calm and unruffled bid, Xiaohua was a bit bewildered. He secretly said, just now, this female cultivator said that she didn't have many spirit stones and wanted to take advantage of the situation to get the demon spear shaft. How come she has spirit stones now? Could it be that she was lying to me? Alas, I don't have many spirit stones left. At this time, that female cultivator said regretfully, I can only add up to this point. If fellow Daoist raises the price again, I can only give up. Xiaohua frowned, rolled his eyes, and cupped his hands. So it's like this. As the saying goes, a good man doesn't fight with a woman. Since that's the case, I can't snatch what you like even more. I won't raise the price. This jade slip belongs to fellow Daoist. Ah. The female cultivator obviously didn't expect Xiaohua to give up so easily. She was astonished, stamping her feet, and asked, how can you not raise the price? Xiaohua laughed, and everyone else also laughed. I gave this jade slip to you, and you're actually not happy. You even want I to raise the price. What kind of logic is this? That female cultivator said a few times, but she was also helpless and could only sit down. All right. This item belongs to this fellow Daoist. Zai Qi smiled and pointed his finger. But right after that, Zai Qi was also a little stunned. However, a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he clapped his hand. That jade slip disappeared, but a light flashed next to the female cultivator. Obviously, it was transferred to the female cultivator's table. Soon after, Zai Qi waved his hand, and a jade bottle appeared in midair. Zai Qi glanced at it and was even more surprised. He said with a smile, strange things happen every year, but this year, my Haoming city has the most. This foundation building pill has become increasingly rare in the auction in recent years, just like the exquisite grass used to concoct foundation building pills. It's getting rarer every year. Every sept, and even every cultivator, treasures this item so that they can keep it for their own disciples. The previous 2 bottles of foundation building pills already caused a sensation, and in the last round of the auction, the penultimate item to be auctioned is actually a foundation building pill. Ah! Foundation building pill, it's really a foundation building pill. Who would still take it out? Several cultivators around Xiaohua unconsciously stood up. Ha! Why do you say that? Xiaohua was stunned. He remembered that when he participated in the auction last time, foundation building pills were indeed rare, but it seemed that they weren't this rare. Listening to Zai Qi's tone, the number of foundation building pills had actually become fewer and fewer in the past 10 years. Alright, these are 2 foundation building pills. The starting price is 100 top-grade spirit stones. Zai Qi stated the starting price that Xiao Hua knew was 5 times the starting price. Good. Xiao Hua immediately understood. No wonder when he entered Haoming City that day and gave Bai Fengliang several foundation building pills, that guy's face was filled with gratitude. It turned out, in the current cultivation world, foundation building pills were actually so rare. 150. Xiao Hua had just started to sigh with emotion when the price of foundation building pills soared by 50%. Crazy. Xiao Hua shook his head and sat steadily on his seat. Looking at everyone's eagerness, he had other plans in his mind. In the end, the 2 foundation building pills were sold for 200 top-grade spirit stones. This made many foundation building cultivators sigh. Fellow Daoist. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and cupped his hands towards the cultivator beside him. I don't quite understand. Why are these foundation building pills so precious? When did fellow Daoist build his foundation? That cultivator didn't answer but asked instead. I'm ashamed. It's already been 40 years. Xiao Hua smiled apologetically. And, fellow Daoist hasn't taken in a disciple yet, right? That's right. That's right. The cultivator nodded and said, since fellow Daoist doesn't use foundation building pills, you naturally wouldn't have thought that foundation building pills would suddenly become scarce in the past 10 years. The question is, why are they scarce? Xiao Hua asked, puzzled. That cultivator shook his head slightly and said in a low voice, I heard some vague news. Fellow Daoist looks familiar and feels like old friends at first sight, that's why I revealed it to you. You can't tell others. Xiao Hua's expression turned cold and he said in all seriousness, I will definitely keep my mouth shut. And I heard that the heavenly Tao has changed greatly. My Tao sect has already reached its end. The ancient celestials will once again revive from overseas. In the future, it might be the world of the celestials. The cultivator was even more serious. The spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits that we use for cultivation are all different from before. All the medicinal pills that are required for cultivation can no longer be refined. Therefore, not only have the prices of spiritual herbs and other things increased, even the important medicinal pills like foundation building pills have been hoarded by cultivators and won't be revealed in the auction again. Ah! Xiao Hua was stunned. However, without waiting for him to speak, that cultivator said proudly, not only that, the spirit stone veins have also undergone great changes. They can no longer be used for cultivation. Many large sects are crazily fighting over spirit stone veins outside. These spirit stones will also become scarce in the future. Xiao Hua originally didn't want to believe this cultivator's words, but he had seen Shanghua sect snatching the spirit stone veins with his own eyes. He couldn't not believe these words. Seeing Xiao Hua's bewildered appearance, that cultivator turned his head very disdainfully. That's right, such ordinary cautiousness scared an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator into a daze. How could he not be proud? Fellow Taoists, this is the last item in the final round of this auction. The Chancellor, who was on the high platform, ignored Xiao Hua's thoughts and said loudly, generally speaking, the consecrators of the Haoming City will save the most valuable items for last. I'm afraid that the foundation building elixir just now was done by them. Chapter 2065. Come, let's see what the final item is. Zai Qi lifted the silk cloth and glanced at the jade slip on the jade plate. He was stunned. After a moment of hesitation, he sent a voice transmission to someone behind him. After confirming, he smiled bitterly and said, even I was surprised by this item. I've made a fool of myself. Then, he picked up the jade slip, looked at it a few times, and said, allow this poor Taoist to keep everyone guessing. What is this? Ha! Could it be that this item has an origin? A cultivator stood up and smiled. Can I take a look? Of course. Zai Chi waved his hand, and the jade plate flew to the cultivator. The cultivator picked up the rhombus-shaped magic tool with 4 missing corners and pondered for a long time. He shook his head and said, "The spiritual energy fluctuations in this item are weak. It must be seriously damaged. It will take a lot of effort to repair it. Moreover, one's spiritual sense can only see the surface. It seems to be able to penetrate it, but there's a faint barrier that prevents it from entering. I can't see what kind of magic tool it is." The other cultivators were also very interested, but they couldn't see any clues. "Let me take a look," a cultivator in a mesmerizing robe said in a deep voice. "Let me take a look first." Similarly, another mesmerizing robe cultivator sitting on the other side said in unison. Then, the first mesmerizing robe cultivator waved his hand, and the jade plate flew in his direction. It seemed like it was about to break free from Zai Chi's control. At the same time, the other mesmerizing robe cultivator stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion. The jade plate also flew in his direction. "Seniors." Zai Chi frowned and said, "Please let go. This item has been appraised by our Haoming City's consecrators. It's a famous magic tool from 1,000 years ago called the Mist Puppet. If you like it, please bid." "What? A magic tool?" Xiao Hua was stunned. Obviously, this was the so-called magic tool he threw into the transportation array on the table. Mist Puppet. This is the mist puppet that is said to be able to create an illusion array on its own. A cultivator looked at the damaged mist puppet in disbelief. "That's right." The Zai Chi nodded. "However, the corrosion on its surface is particularly severe. Not only does it look completely different from before, even the outer formation has been destroyed. According to the consecrator's speculation, it should be because the owner of the black mist tree had died in the black mist forest, and the black mist tree had been corroded by the black mist sand for thousands of years. It is also because of this that Imo Bao, who has not been seen in the black forest for thousands of years, has blown this item out of the black forest, allowing it to see the light of day again. Since it's the Wu Qi, this poor Taoist won't say too much about how powerful it is. The core of this magic treasure is as good as new. If any fellow Taoist can repair it, it will be able to regain the power of the Wu Qi from 1,000 years ago." As the Chancellor spoke, he took the Wu Qi into his hand and reported a number of spirit stones that shocked Xiao Hua. That's right, this was a transcendent artifact. Although it was damaged, its core was still intact. It was much more useful than those fragments and so on. How could it not have a good starting price? Hearing the number of spirit stones, the stingy Xiao Hua was somewhat regretful. He had only thought this was an ordinary magic tool. However, he immediately laughed inwardly. There are many similar items in this little master space. I'll take one out and test it out. I'll know that these things have their origins. In the future, I'll slowly find out how to use them. At worst, I'll take it out and bid for some spirit stones. That's better than not knowing its value, right? The mist puppet was indeed famous. Very quickly, the price reached a very high price. The crowd of Foundation establishment cultivators stopped and watched the 2 cultivators that the Chancellor called seniors bid. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the mist puppet was finally won by the second mist puppet cultivator. "Alright, fellow Taoists." After the mist puppet cultivator delivered the spirit stones, the Chancellor clapped his hand. The entire hall flashed with brilliance, and all the cultivators' tables lit up. A storage pouch naturally appeared on Xiao Hua's table. Xiao Hua reached out and put it into his bosom. After the brilliance flashed, the Chancellor said, "This time, the auction for Foundation Establishment Cultivators has come to an end. Thank you, fellow Taoists, for coming to my Haoming City. 5 years later, my Haoming City will still hold the auction for Foundation Establishment Cultivators. I welcome fellow Taoists to come again. In addition, fellow Taoists who consigned the Mist Puppet Cultivators, your spirit stones have already been delivered. Please check and accept them. If there's anything inappropriate, please don't leave the auction. My Haoming City will help you deal with it." Immediately, the entire high platform radiated rays of light in all directions. All kinds of brilliance flashed, and rainbow bridges stretched out from the high platform to the feet of the cultivators. "Let's go." Xiaohua sighed inwardly. He floated onto the nearest rainbow bridge, only to see the rainbow bridge slowly shrink. At this moment, Xiaohua heard a crisp and urgent voice say, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." Xiaohua turned around and saw that thin and weak-looking female cultivator. She was waving at him and seemed to want to fly over. Unfortunately, before she could fly, the Chancellor, who had disappeared a moment ago, appeared in front of her. He seemed to be looking for her. "Fellow Taoist, please wait for me outside. I have something to discuss with fellow Taoist." The female cultivator was somewhat embarrassed. After shouting at Xiaohua a few times, she turned around and spoke to the Chancellor. Xiaohua didn't respond. Obviously, the female cultivator wanted to get the devil's spear tail from him, and Xiaohua absolutely wouldn't give it away. Xiaohua followed the rainbow bridge out of the auction. His expression changed as he waited. Xiaohua was somewhat hesitant. After thinking for a moment, he flew to the side of the city guard who was guarding the auction. Without waiting for him to speak, the city guard respectfully saluted and said, "Greetings, Senior. Is there anything I can help you with?" "Well, I don't understand." Xiaohua asked. "I specially came to Haoming City to look for some body-refining cultivation methods in this auction, but there wasn't a single one in the entire auction. Haoming City's auction doesn't live up to its name." The city guard was stunned. Obviously, he didn't expect Xiaohua to ask him such a question. Thus, after thinking for a moment, he smiled apologetically and said, "Junior wants to ask Senior. Does Senior want this cultivation method for your future nephew?" Xiaohua shook his head slightly. "This cultivation method is what I want to use." Hee, Senior must be joking with Junior. A smile appeared on the city guard's face as he said, "Senior is now in the Foundation Establishment realm, and the Jin Dan Dao is right in front of you. As long as you cultivate according to this cultivation method, you won't be far from the Jin Dan Dao, and even the nascent soul realm is in sight. Why are you looking for a body-refining path? If Senior is thinking for your future nephew, Junior might be able to believe it." Fellow Taoist really understands. Xiaohua changed his mind and said with a smile. Junior has seen a lot of things, that's all." The city guard was somewhat proud as he said, "Since it's a cultivation method used by aura refining disciples, it naturally has to be found in the auction for aura refining cultivators. Senior came to this auction for Foundation Establishment Cultivators, so it's natural for you to use a bamboo basket to draw water." Chapter 2066. Not necessarily. Xiaohua said with a smile, "Foundation building pills also appeared in the auction just now. Don't tell me foundation building pills aren't for aura refining disciples?" The city guard replied confidently, "Senior is a foundation building cultivator, so you must know the quality of foundation building pills and whether they can be used or not. But what about body refining cultivation techniques? Do you know if they're suitable for your disciples? I'm afraid you're the only one who knows this kind of cultivation technique, right?" Xiaohua laughed. He clapped his hands and took out a few spirit stones, stuffed them into the city guard's hands, and said, "Fellow Daoist is right. I'm really bad." The city guard reached out his hand without leaving a trace and caught the spirit stones. Soon after, he whispered a few words to Xiaohua through telepathy, making him beam with joy. Right at this moment, a figure rushed out of the auction very quickly. She looked all around with a somewhat anxious expression on her face. It was the strong but thin female cultivator from just now. Xiaohua had already regained his original appearance. Whether it was his face or figure, he had already changed. Only his Daoist robe hadn't been changed. The female cultivator first saw Xiaohua's Daoist robe. Her happy expression only flashed for a moment before it was replaced by heavy disappointment. "City guard, have you seen?" The female cultivator shouted at the city guard and described Xiaohua's disguised appearance. "Senior, please no." The city guard was still respectful. Junior has never seen a senior with this kind of appearance. "Oh," the female cultivator nodded and asked Xiaohua somewhat unwillingly, "Has fellow Daoist seen him before?" That cultivator wore the same Daoist robe as fellow Daoist. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, and he said with a smile, "I haven't seen him either. However, is there something fellow Daoist didn't say inside? How did you find him outside?" "Alas," the female cultivator sighed and said reluctantly, "I have some matters to attend to." Right at this moment, a voice said, Chow, is that guy here?" "Brother Ming, that cultivator disappeared a long time ago." The female cultivator called Chow turned her head in disappointment. "It's all Chow's fault for acting on my own and provoking a senior from Haoming City." Alas, Xiaohua raised his head to look. A tall and sturdy man who was half a head taller than him slowly walked over. This cultivator was dressed strangely. His arms and legs were exposed, and his skin was covered with black hair. He was like a thick pillar. "Ah, a middle foundation establishment cultivator." Xiaohua's eyes flashed and he looked at the female cultivator. This female cultivator doesn't seem to be a good person. I don't know what she's planning. As a result, Xiaohua dispelled the idea of continuing to collude with Chow. He turned around and flew towards the residence of the aura refining cultivators. "Forget it, Chow. Since we can't find it, then forget it." The male cultivator smiled and said, "There are so many demonic artifacts. You can just find another one and try to repair it." "Why do you only want that one?" "Sigh, Brother Ming, you don't know," Chow said as she flew. "That demonic device has an extraordinary origin, and Chow learned about it from the ancient records in her clan. If it wasn't for the fact that there was something special inside the demonic spear, Chow wouldn't have been able to imagine it. How did a weapon that was recorded in ancient times fall into the hands of the demon realm? Furthermore, it has become a demonic artifact. So that's how it is." That male cultivator suddenly understood and smiled apologetically. "How would I know about these things? Only a skilled craftsman like Chow in the clan can look up the ancient records in the clan." "Sigh, let's go." Chow sighed and said, "Not only did we not get that demonic spear, but we also lost some spirit stones. In this way, there are some things that can't be exchanged." I understand now." That male cultivator slapped his forehead and said, Brother Ming, what did you think of?" Chow asked curiously. The male cultivator said naively, "Since that guy snatched the demonic spear's tail from you, then he might have seen something. Maybe he also has the same broken spear as you." Chow was speechless. Her thoughts were naturally the same as Xiaohua's. She also thought of the other party's situation, which was why she was determined to find Xiaohua. "Let's go, Brother Ming." Let's go to the shops in Haoming City and see if there's anything that can be exchanged. Xiao said indifferently. A moment after Xiao Hua and the others left, Yin Yu flew over and very familiarly walked in front of the city guard. He quietly stuffed a few spirit stones into the guard's hand and whispered a few words. A trace of embarrassment appeared on the city guard's face, but after thinking for a moment, he answered with a smile. Hearing this, Yin Yu's face showed a satisfied expression. Soon after, he handed over a few more spirit stones. Xiao Hua flew into the area where the aura refining cultivators lived. Without waiting for the city guard to come over, just like before, several aura refining cultivators came over to strike up a conversation. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "I want to go to Yutian Paradise. Who among you knows?" Sure enough, a seemingly quick-witted aura refining cultivator quickly raised his hand and said, "Senior, this junior knows." Good, you take I there. Senior, please. After saying that aura refining cultivator led the way and flew up first. After flying for several breaths, that aura refining cultivator asked cautiously, "Senior, what do you always want to go to Yutian Paradise to look for?" Everything was the same as the shops Xiao Hua had seen before. "Senior, what are you looking for?" A cultivator wearing a brand new robe stepped forward and asked respectfully. "Junior is Haoming City's city guard. I am here to guide Senior and fellow Taoists in this immortal's cave." "Oh, I want to see aura refining cultivation methods. Where are they?" Xiao Hua knew that the things here had all been appraised by Haoming City's consecrators, so the possibility of him encountering rare things wasn't high. Therefore, he went straight to the point and asked. The city guard didn't find it strange and said with a smile, "Senior, please go to the 4th floor. There are cultivation methods required by aura refining cultivators there. I hope Senior will be satisfied. Do you need Junior to take you there?" "Oh. Is there really even cultivation methods for aura refining?" Xiao Hua was slightly surprised. He naturally thought of his predicament back then when he didn't have any cultivation methods. Then, he shook his head and said, "No need, I will go there myself." "Senior, please." The city guard smiled and pointed in the direction to the 4th floor. Xiao Hua was full of curiosity when he went up to the 4th floor. He randomly found a shop and went in. "Senior, what kind of cultivation methods do you need?" The person who greeted him was still the same city guard in the same robe. Xiao Hua didn't say anything. Instead, he looked up and sized up this shop. He saw that this shop was an oval-shaped space that was more than 100 feet in size. It was divided into dozens of partitions, and each partition had a city guard standing straight as if they were responsible for their own duties. Xiao Hua was standing inside the shop, facing a crescent-shaped table with several balls of different colors on it. The city guard who greeted him was standing in front of these balls. "What kind of cultivation methods do you have here?" Xiao Hua asked in return. Fellow Taoist. The city guard closest to the shop naturally walked over quickly and asked warmly, "May I know where fellow Taoist's cultivation technique is? We'll have to ask the consecrator to come over and appraise it before we can give you a corresponding price to exchange for other cultivation techniques." The cultivator bit his lip and asked, "It said that the Jade Field Grotto Heaven only has cultivation techniques up to the 4th layer of the Qi refining realm. What I need is a cultivation technique that leads directly to the foundation building realm. May I know if the Jade Field Grotto Heaven has it?" "That depends on how good fellow Taoist's body refining technique is." The city guard smiled and said, "If it's rare, the consecrator will give a suggestion, and fellow Taoist's request will certainly be satisfied." "Where is fellow Taoist's cultivation technique?" I just came here to ask." A trace of redness appeared on the cultivator's face. If Haoming City can satisfy my request, I can bring the cultivation technique over for appraisal. And then I'll have to ask fellow Daoists to bring the body refining technique over first. The city guard wasn't impatient and just dealt with the cultivator patiently. Oh. All right. The cultivator nodded slightly and turned around to leave without hesitation. Xiaohua's eyes turned, and he nodded slightly at the city guard accompanying him before hastily chasing after the cultivator. Behind him, various expressions flashed through the eyes of the group of Haoming City's city guards. Some were regretful, some were resentful, and some were angry. However, sympathy was indeed sympathy, but none of them took any further action, even if it was something as trivial as raising their hands to remind the cultivator. Xiaohua left the shop and unexpectedly didn't see the cultivator. Xiaohua hastily released his divine sense and looked around. Ha! That guy actually slipped away so quickly. It seems that it wasn't a trap. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and thought to himself pensively. He had just come to the Jade Field Grotto Heaven to look for a body refining technique, and an chi refining cultivator came to sell a similar cultivation technique. This couldn't help but arouse his suspicion. However, he didn't regret not being able to see the chi refining cultivator. After all, what he was looking for was a bone tempering technique. The body refining technique was just an excuse. It seems that I can't have high hopes for this Jade Field Grotto Heaven. Xiaohua had seen this shop before and knew that Haoming City was behind it. For chi refining cultivators, the Jade Field Grotto Heaven might be an excellent place, but for foundation building cultivators like him, it probably didn't have any real meaning. With that thought in mind, Xiaohua glanced at the shop and walked towards the 5th floor. Just as he reached the 5th floor, he saw the thin and weak cultivator from before still in a hurry, as if he had ulterior motives. Oh, so he came to the 5th floor to inquire. Xiaohua suddenly understood. Just now, his divine sense was only focused on looking down, but he didn't expect the cultivator to actually go to the 5th floor. Greetings, Senior. The cultivator's divine sense swept past Xiaohua and he promptly stood to the side respectfully, bowing and saluting as he waited for Xiaohua to go first. Xiaohua walked in front of the cultivator, stopped, and looked at the cultivator from head to toe. Under Xiaohua's gaze, the cultivator was abnormally embarrassed. His hand slightly shrunk into his Daoist robe, and when his eyes met Xiaohua's gaze, he felt as if he was being stabbed, and he hastily avoided it. Say. Senior. The cultivator timidly probed, is there something you need, Senior? And this old man has something to ask you. Xiaohua said amiably. Senior. The cultivator gathered his courage and said, is there anything this junior can help you with? Oh, just now, this old man heard you mention a nameless body refining technique in the shop. Can you let this old man take a look? Xiaohua said with a smile, this old man is looking for a body refining technique for my nephew. If this technique is suitable, this old man won't be stingy with any spirit stones. Ah. A trace of vigilance immediately appeared on the cultivator's face. His eyes moved up and down, sizing up Xiaohua for a long time before he said in a low voice, how many spirit stones can Senior pay? If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Calm to vote for it. Chapter 2068. Hee, as long as it's a suitable cultivation technique, I can definitely satisfy you. I can even give you a suitable chi refinement cultivation technique. Xiaohua said with a smile. Seeing a trace of disappointment in the cultivator's eyes, Xiaohua smiled and untied the storage pouch at his waist. He handed it to the cultivator and said, take a look. Are these spirit stones to your satisfaction? The cultivator took the storage pouch and scanned it with his divine sense. Joy and slight greed appeared in his eyes. The hand that was holding the storage pouch even shrank a few times. He said anxiously, "Of course. I'm satisfied." "That's good. Where's your cultivation technique? Let me take a look." Xiaohua nodded slightly. "This." The cultivator smiled apologetically and said, "I do have a body refining cultivation technique, but... Senior, do you think I can carry it with me in the storage pouch?" Xiaohua frowned. He understood why the cultivator was just asking in the shop and didn't do anything. "Forget it." Xiaohua flicked his sleeve and reached out to take the storage pouch. At this moment, the cultivator stretched out the storage pouch and reluctantly shrank it back. He smiled apologetically and said, "Senior, I left the cultivation technique outside Haoming City. If you're willing, can you follow me?" But at this point, the cultivator thought of something and his face turned a little pale. "What? You actually dare to ask me to follow you outside Haoming City?" Xiaohua looked at the cultivator with interest. "Aren't you afraid I'll kill you?" The cultivator was indeed afraid and handed the storage pouch over. However, just as Xiaohua took the storage pouch, the cultivator shrank his hand again. He gritted his teeth and said, "Senior, can you wait for me here? I'll give you the cultivation technique jade slip right away." Xiaohua smiled as he looked at the cultivator and pointed at the storage bag. "This old man can wait here, but you'll have to return the storage bag to this old man." "Forget it." The cultivator gritted his teeth, put the storage pouch in front of his eyes, and said, "I've always been very good at judging people. Senior has talked to me for so long, and you're not annoyed at all. Instead, you're very modest, so I trust you. You're definitely not the kind of senior who forgets righteousness for profit and bullies me at will." "N." Xiaohua nodded slightly, retracted his hand, and said, "You can take the storage pouch, but this old man still wants to see your body refinement technique. If it's suitable, you can take these spirit stones. If it's not suitable, this old man will still take them back." "Yes, I understand. Junior will definitely satisfy Senior." That cultivator's face flushed red as he hurriedly said without thinking, "Let's go, lead the way." Xiaohua said, "Senior, please." The cultivator carefully put away the storage pouch, raised his hand, and led the way. The two of them left the Yutian cave and quickly left the mountain range. The cultivator stuck a flying talisman on his body and led the way in front. Xiaohua followed behind the cultivator at a moderate pace. Along the way, many cultivators saluted Xiaohua very respectfully with different expressions in their eyes. Obviously, they also had different guesses about the two of them. After leaving the mountain range of Haoming City, they arrived at the prosperous area surrounded by the mountain range. It was where all the cultivation sect's shops and strongholds were located in Haoming City. At the same time, there were also many ordinary inns. Xiaohua originally thought that the aura refining cultivator would stay in an ordinary inn and that the body refining jade slip would also be placed in the inn. Unexpectedly, the aura refining cultivator flew straight through the largest prosperous area and headed straight out of Haoming City. "Ha!" Xiaohua's expression remained unchanged, but there was a thoughtful look in his eyes. At this moment, the cultivator turned around and smiled apologetically. "I just came to Haoming City a few days ago and missed the auction. Moreover, the spirit stones in my bag were really limited, so I couldn't bear to spend them on these inns. Therefore, I hid the jade slip and other important things outside the city. And let's go." Xiaohua smiled. "If you're not afraid, why should I be afraid?" Yes, a hint of panic flashed in the cultivator's eyes. He seemed to be afraid of Xiaohua, so he lowered his head and didn't say anything else. After leaving Haoming City, the cultivator kept heading west, which was different from the direction Xiaohua had entered Haoming City. The surrounding scenery was also very different. At first, there were lush vegetation, but soon, the mountain terrain became dangerous. The vegetation also withered, and the dead trees began to point toward the sky. Senior, don't worry. I hid the storage bag in a mountain stream. We'll be there soon. The cultivator who had been silent finally spoke again. Since you're afraid that the cultivation method will be robbed, you should find a safe place. Wouldn't it be easier for someone to take it away if you put it here? Xiaohua said with a smile. I feel that, you seem to have some bad intentions towards me. Alas, Senior, you don't know. I'm an itinerant cultivator. I'm often robbed by other cultivators, so I have to be careful. The cultivator smiled bitterly. According to my experience, it's much safer to put it here than to keep it on me. As they spoke, they had already crossed a foothill and saw a spacious place next to a gurgling stream. Senior, please wait a moment. The cultivator turned around and smiled shyly. He pointed at his feet and said, I hid the storage bag there. And go and get it. Xiaohua stopped in mid-air and said indifferently. The cultivator's figure slowly descended and approached the stream, but he wasn't in a hurry to land. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and peeked behind him from the corner of his eye. It didn't matter if the cultivator didn't look, but when he looked, he was stunned. There was no one at the place where Xiaohua was. The cultivator was slightly stunned and quickly turned around to look. I'm here. Xiaohua's voice sounded above the cultivator's head. Why are you looking for me instead of getting the storage bag? The cultivator's face showed a trace of redness, and there was even a trace of panic. Say. Senior, Xiaohua flicked his large sleeve, and a swift and fierce force was generated, covering the cultivator. Senior, how can you go back on your word? The cultivator sensed something was wrong and his figure unexpectedly flew up. He did his best to dodge while speaking in a flustered and exasperated manner. Ha ha ha! Xiaohua's figure followed the cultivator, neither too far nor too close. The force of the universe in the sleeve was also evenly distributed. He chuckled and said, I just said I was looking for a body-tempering cultivation method, and you delivered yourself to my door. Moreover, I'm a foundation establishment cultivator, and you actually let me follow you without worry. Don't you think I'll be suspicious? Marshal Uncle Yen. Quickly save this brat. When the cultivator heard this, he was really anxious. Seeing that he couldn't dodge Xiaohua's magic power, he hurriedly shouted for help. Xiaohua wore a cold smile, and his divine sense swept over the foothill and the stream surroundings. Ha ha ha! Xiaohua, as expected, you're exceptionally cunning. You even saw through my arrangements. With a loud laugh, a light flashed on a rock beside the foothill, and Yen Yu's figure flashed out. However, since you've fallen into my trap, even if you've broken through to the middle stage of foundation establishment, how can you escape my wrath? What? You don't want this disciple's life anymore. Xiaohua's mouth had a smile that wasn't a smile. His hand tightened, and the cultivator was held in Xiaohua's hand like a little chick. Marshal Uncle Yen, quickly. Quickly save this brat. The cultivator struggled with all his might, and said anxiously, Senior, you promised that you absolutely wouldn't harm this brat's life. Marshal Uncle Yen. Xiaohua asked indifferently. I've never seen fellow Daoist Yen before, and I don't know when I've offended fellow Daoist Yen. You actually set up a formation here to deal with me. Immediately, Xiaohua's gaze swept over his surroundings again. Oh. You can actually see through these 4 forbidden formations. Yen Yu was somewhat astonished, but then he snorted coldly and said, even if you can see through the formation, what can you do? Heaven's net has a long arm, but nothing escapes. You killed my Yen clan's direct descendant back then, and now you've fallen into my hands. Do you still expect us Foundation establishment cultivators to compare with the motley crew of the Heavenly Demon Sect? Yen Clan. Heavenly Demon Sect. Xiao Hua's expression changed. You are. At this time, Yen Yu waved his hand and took out a triangular formation flag. With a light wave, the figures of Xuanyan schools Xia Ming, Qian Han and Liang Yu appeared on the other four sides of Xiaohua, beside the foothills and the stream. Oh, so it's fellow Daoist from Xuanyan school. Seeing Xia Ming and Qian Han, Xiaohua came to a realization. You're Yanli, the direct descendant of Xuanyan school, right? That's right, it's me. A trace of malevolence flashed across Yen Yu's face. You and that little girl from the Kai clan actually dared to scheme against my Yen clan's nephew. This old man's only blood relative actually died in your hands. If this old man doesn't kill you with his own hands, how can this old man's wrath be appeased? Avenging a descendant of your blood relative. Xiao Hua sneered. Looking at the cultivator in his hand, he asked, You delivered a disciple of Xuanyan school to this Xiao. Is this disciple's life not worth his life? Only your Yen clan's disciple's life is precious. Moreover, do you think this Xiao doesn't know what your goal is? Ha ha ha, Yen Yu laughed heartily. This disciple is a disciple of Xuanyan school. He needs this old man's help, so it's normal for this old man to make him do things. As for his life and death, it's in your hands. If you kill him, you'll be offending my Xuanyan school. This is different from killing my Wei. Different? Xiao Hua sneered at the aura refining cultivator. If you want to blame someone, blame your master for not caring about your life and death. Since you dared to get involved with this Xiao, don't think you'll be able to return alive. Senior, please spare. The aura refining cultivator was extremely terrified, hastily begging for mercy. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua's hand still slightly exerted force. With a light crack, the cultivator's neck tilted, and he was crushed to death by Xiao Hua. Following a wave of Xiao Hua's hand, the corpse fell to the ground. Ha ha ha, Xiao Hua laughed heartily. Old dog Yen, are you satisfied now? Can you legitimately kill me, a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect? Yen Yu's complexion slightly changed. He snorted coldly and said, That's right. You made a move to kill my Xuanyan school's aura refining disciple, using the strong to bully the weak. I am a Foundation establishment cultivator of Xuanyan school. How can I not avenge my Xuanyan school's disciple? How can I not restore my Xuanyan school's face? In the future, even if this matter were to spread out, who would be able to say this old man's shortcomings? Chapter 2069. Yes, that's right. Xiao Hua smiled, but do you think this matter can be spread? Ha ha ha, Yen Yu laughed, yes, do you think this matter can be spread? As he spoke, Yen Yu's face revealed a sinister expression. He waved the formation flag in his hand, and a dozen faint spiritual energy fluctuations flashed, shooting towards Liang Yu and the other two. Then, 4 ripples of spiritual energy fluctuated with the 4 of them as the center, quickly controlling an area of several dozen feet around Xiao Hua. A powerful force pressed down on Xiao Hua from above. At the same time, the spiritual energy in Xiao Hua's body was also suppressed, as if it was frozen. It actually showed signs of solidifying. Ouch! Xiao Hua was shocked, his face slightly pale, and his figure fell down. Then, Xiao Hua seemed to be struggling, flying obliquely, wanting to fly in the direction of the stream. Ha ha ha, you still want to fly out of the 4 forbidden arrays. Yen Yu laughed sinisterly, waved the formation flag, and said, Senior brother Jia, come and help me. As Yen Yu waved the formation flag, Jia Ming's figure suddenly flew up, clapped his hand, and took out a small wooden dragon. Its shape was extremely similar to Jiang Zhuqing's. Go, under the urging of Dan Hanming's magic power, that wooden dragon instantly transformed into a light that was the size of a small dragon. It slightly twisted in midair, and with a clear roar, it pounced towards Xiaohua. Xiaohua was in a difficult situation at this time. His figure was unstable, and at the same time, he clapped his hand, and the cloud-suppressing seal flew out crookedly, and the bronze brilliance on it slightly bloomed. However, that scattered light was obviously suppressed by the 4 forbidden arrays, and it wasn't as bright as before. Following Xiaohua's finger, the cloud-suppressing seal seemed to be moving against the water, extremely slowly, and smashed towards the wooden dragon. Pang! A clear sound rang out, and the wooden dragon hit the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal was slightly crooked, and was actually blocked to the side. The wooden dragon only paused for a moment, and a lively brilliance overflowed, hovering above the cloud-suppressing seal, entangling it. Then, under Jia Ming's control, it dragged the cloud-suppressing seal to the side. The cloud-suppressing seal, on the other hand, hummed softly, as if it was trying its best to break free from the wooden dragon's shackles and forcefully flew in the direction where Qian Han was standing. Humph! What Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple who killed a cultivator of the same level as him? Seeing this situation, Yan Yu's heart calmed down, and he sneered. This old man spent an extremely large amount of spirit stones and spent an extremely great amount of effort to set up such a formation. Just the 4 of us Foundation establishment cultivators are sufficient to kill this beast. Then, he waved the formation flag and shouted, "Senior Brother Qian, let's put in more effort and end the battle quickly. Don't create more trouble." Following the movement of Yan Yu's formation flag, the sealing power of the formation in front of Qian Han lessened. Qian Han clapped his hand and his magic tool, the jade flute, flew into the air. The jade flute was originally the size of a palm, but when it flew into the air, it became a few feet long. A series of woo-woo sounds came from the jade flute. The sound waves surrounded Xiaohua's surroundings and rushed straight into his mind. Hiss! Xiaohua originally looked like he was trying his best to support himself. As a result, his eyebrows furrowed even more. His 2 hands involuntarily rose up, as if he wanted to cover his ears. Stupid to the extreme. Qian Han sneered. His 10 fingers continuously moved, as if they were really touching the jade flute. That confinement also contained a strong suction force. Not only were their bodies heavy and unable to move at will, even the true essence in their meridians was being controlled by that suction force. What kind of magic is this? While the 2 were shocked, they hastily activated the yellow talismans protecting their bodies, but they saw brilliance overflowing from their bodies. The protective magic did its utmost to resist Xiaohua's heaven and earth sleeve technique. Jia Ming and Qian Han were shocked, but as the formation master of the 4 forbidden formations, Yan Yu was even more shocked. He was very clear in his heart that Xiaohua's method of resisting the formation's confinement was more than a level higher than his. Otherwise, it was absolutely impossible for him to trigger the formation's backlash. This guy. Yan Yu's eyes widened, and his divine sense also locked onto Xiaohua. The magic power in his hand surged out even more, trying to control the formation flag with all his might. No, Xiaohua is definitely not an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. The more he tried to control the formation flag, the more the powerful counterforce wanted to snatch the formation flag from his hands. This made Yan Yu even more shocked. Go, Yan Yu slapped his forehead, and the pressure of an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator pressed down like a mountain. Within the 4 forbidden formations, only his pressure could be used normally. Middle-stage Foundation establishment. And at this time, Xiaohua's figure suddenly accelerated, charging towards Jia Ming like lightning. Xiaohua no longer concealed his cultivation base, and his mid-stage foundation establishment cultivation base was revealed. Moreover, when he saw Yan Yu release his pressure, he also released his own without hesitation. Seeing Xiaohua actually release his pressure within the 4 forbidden formations, Yan Yu cried out in surprise, but he was even more puzzled. Unless Xiaohua had the cultivation base of a golden core cultivator, how could he so easily break free from the formation's control? But everything that happened before his eyes made him even more puzzled. He saw Xiaohua's figure pouncing towards Jia Ming, and his flying speed didn't seem to be restricted by the formation. As Xiaohua waved his left hand, a thunder palm that was several feet long struck Jia Ming's body. Bursts of lightning flashed, and Jia Ming's defense was almost completely destroyed. And only at this time did Jia Ming react. He hastily formed a seal, and the same thunder palm also struck towards Xiaohua. Chapter 2070. But Xiaohua didn't seem to care about this. With a slight step, his figure flashed in midair, and an afterimage appeared. He actually circled to Jia Ming's side, and just as he left, Qian Han's great confinement technique also attacked. It just happened to be dodged by him. Seeing that Xiaohua actually dodged the great confinement technique out of thin air, Qian Han's eyes narrowed, and a bad feeling arose in his heart. Unfortunately, before he could think of anything else, a pair of pitch-black devil hammers also appeared out of thin air, and like shooting stars, they struck Jia Ming's shoulders. With a loud "pa" sound, the light around Jia Ming's body dimmed, and all the protective light was broken. Immediately after, there was a "kacha" sound, and the second hammer followed closely, smashing Jia Ming's shoulders until they caved in. Jia Ming screamed miserably, and his figure fell from midair, dead. How is this possible? Qian Han almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. A middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator was actually smashed to death by another middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator using a devil weapon. This was a legend that only existed in the demon-resisting valley. However, without waiting for him to rub his eyes, the pitch-black devil hammers were actually thrown out by Xiaohua again, and in Qian Han's eyes, they became bigger and bigger, and were precisely aimed at himself. Junior Marshal Brother Yan, save me. Qian Han suddenly felt a burst of coldness in his heart. Even Jia Ming couldn't dodge, how could he possibly escape? At this time, Yan Yu also seemed to have awakened from a dream, and hurriedly waved the already somewhat uncontrollable array flag. Liang Yu, who had long been eager to give it a try, or perhaps he was scared out of his wits, hastily clapped his hands, and a 5-colored brilliance flashed, and a fierce chi was born from his hands. A magic weapon that looked like half a pair of scissors was raised in midair by Liang Yu. Qian Han felt a chill like cutting his face, and his heart unconsciously relaxed, knowing that Liang Yu had an extremely powerful magic weapon in his hands. But his heart relaxed, and he also saw the devil hammers flying in front of his eyes suddenly change direction and fly towards Liang Yu's magic weapon, but an even more dangerous feeling was born. Because Xiaohua's devil hammers went, but Xiaohua's figure flew several times faster than the devil hammers in front of him. Xiaohua's smiling face was so magnified, so clear, even Xiaohua's lightly waving hand was incomparably clear in Qian Han's eyes. True Samadhi fire. But seeing that within the pale green color of Xiaohua's hand was a wisp of crimson true Samadhi fire, Qian Han did not know whether to rejoice or grieve in his heart. He did not expect that Xiaohua would quickly wipe his own body and immediately chase after the devil hammer and attack Liang Yu. He could only naturally cry out in alarm. The seemingly weak true Samadhi fire suddenly burned fiercely, instantly igniting the restrictions around him. It was as if all the restrictions and spiritual chi of heaven and earth were helping the true Samadhi fire to burn. Ah! Qian Han screamed in agony as he followed in Jie Ming's footsteps. The true Samadhi fire seemed to have burned through his heart and lungs. His talismans and other items were like paper. Seeing Xiao Hua advance instead of retreating and kill Jie Mingjing and Qian Han with extreme ease, Yan Yu and Liang Yu were greatly shocked in their hearts when they saw that Xiao Hua's previous fear and panic were just a cover-up. Especially Yan Yu, he was the master of the Four Gates restrictive spell formation. From the backlash of the formation flags, he already knew that Xiao Hua's cultivation and magic power had long exceeded his expectations. The rumors he heard that Xiao Hua killed 3 Foundation establishment cultivators were definitely not hearsay. Fortunately, he laid down the formation in advance, otherwise the 4 of them would have already died in Xiao Hua's hands. And at this time, Liang Yu's flying scissors had already been released. The flying scissors were in the shape of a flood dragon, the head of the dragon coiled around the handle of the scissors, the body of the dragon as the scissors. The flying scissors were in the air, just like a flood dragon swinging its tail. Although Liang Yu was afraid, he was also in the formation, so it was difficult for him to sheath his blade. But Liang Yu braced himself and urged his magic power. The flying scissors shone brightly and chopped down towards Xiao Hua's head. Feeling the coldness of the flying scissors and the sharpness of the magic treasure flying scissors, how could Xiao Hua not know the power of this magic treasure? Sucking in a breath of cold air, he pointed his finger at the cloud-suppressing seal. At this time, the cloud-suppressing seal also released a brilliant brilliance. Several clouds flew out from the cloud-suppressing seal and quickly blocked above Xiao Hua's head. Swish swish swish, several light sounds rang out in succession. The flying scissors cut through the clouds like a sickle harvesting wheat, easily cutting through the clouds. The cloud-suppressing seal hacked down. Withdraw! Seeing the power of the flying scissors, how could Xiao Hua dare to let the cloud-suppressing seal touch it? With a wave of his hand, the cloud-suppressing seal quickly flew towards Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's other hand brushed, and the devil hammer was taken out again to meet the flying scissors. With a sharp screeching sound, the flying scissors slashed across the devil hammer. Under Xiao Hua's tremendous strength, the scissors were sent flying into the air. Xiao Hua's eyes swept over the devil hammer, and he couldn't help but be shocked. A faint scar had actually appeared on the devil hammer. Good, what magic treasure is this? Xiao Hua's eyes swept over the flying scissors that made a slight turn in the air and flew towards him again, and he thought to himself. In the distance, Yan Yu was originally afraid and wanted to escape. But seeing how powerful Liang Yu's magic treasure was, he hesitated in his heart. With a tpu, he spat out a mouthful of blood onto the array flag in his hand. The array flag that was not easy to control immediately stabilized, and a trace of blood-red light was emitted from the array flag. Fight! Yan Yu waved the array flag again, as if the array flag was extremely heavy. And following the wave of the array flag, a great force appeared out of nowhere around Xiao Hua, as if it wanted to crush Xiao Hua. Not only that, after Yan Yu strengthened the 4 forbidden formations, he slapped his hand, and a fist-sized pill furnace flew out from his storage pouch. Yan Yu opened his mouth again, and a wisp of flame flew out from his mouth. The flame flashed and flew into the pill furnace. The pill furnace suddenly expanded, and a scarlet flame shot out from the pill furnace. Go! Yan Yu's divine sense swept out, and he saw Liang Yu's flying scissors chopping towards Xiao Hua again. He also pointed his finger at the pill furnace, and he chanted an incantation. A palm-sized fiery swallow flew out from the pill furnace, and rushed towards Xiao Hua's back. That fiery swallow's temperature was extremely high, and the surrounding air was burned to the point of collapse. From the looks of it, it was absolutely not inferior to the true Samadhi fire. Xiao Hua saw that Yan Yu and Liang Yu did not escape, and he was overjoyed in his heart. At the same time that he held the devil hammer in his left hand to block the flying scissors, he waved his right hand, and the yang leaf fan appeared. Gathering his magic power, he waved it, and a crimson dragon rushed towards Yan Yu's fiery swallow. Ah! Seeing the crimson dragon rushing towards the fiery swallow, and easily swallowing the fiery swallow, Yan Yu could not help but be stunned. If there was no formation, he might have thought that Xiao Hua's magic treasure was powerful, but this was a formation. If Xiao Hua did not have magic power that was several levels higher than his, it was impossible for him to have such an absolute advantage. Yan Yu changed his mind, and his previous obsession with revenge had now turned into nothingness. He waved his hand, wanting to take back the pill furnace, and at the same time, he quickly set up the formation flags, and one restriction after another struck towards Xiao Hua. While he himself urged his flying technique, ignoring Liang Yu, and prepared to escape by himself. But at this moment, Yan Yu felt a sudden pain in his mud pill palace, as if he had been pierced by a flying sword. Ah! Yan Yu screamed in pain. The dermic powers in his body were withdrawn, and his body fell from midair. However, this piercing pain only lasted for an instant. When the pain subsided, Yan Yu stabilized his body in midair. Before he could realize what was going on, Xiao Hua's figure once again abruptly sped up. With lightning speed, he pounced in front of Yan Yu. That massive devil hammer smashed towards Yan Yu like a mountain. Feeling the incomparable suffocation of the demonic hammer smashing down, Yan Yu was a little flustered. He waved the formation flags in his hand again, and the power of the formation rose sharply, wanting to block the demonic hammer's path. However, at the critical moment, another stabbing pain appeared in his divine sense. Yan Yu's magic power stagnated, and he could not wave the formation flags. With a muffled sound, the demonic hammer smashed down, easily hitting Yan Yu's forehead. The brilliance around Yan Yu's body flickered, and then it was annihilated. Despair appeared in Yan Yu's eyes from the stabbing pain. Before he could scream, his head was smashed into pieces, and his entire corpse fell from midair. With Yan Yu's death, the four forbidden formations immediately lost their effectiveness. Liang Yu did not say anything, turned around, and flew in the direction of Haoming City, and even ignored the flying scissors that were flying towards Xiao Hua. How could Xiao Hua let Liang Yu go? His figure flew again, and his speed was several times faster than Liang Yu's. Without waiting for Liang Yu to fly more than 300 meters, Xiao Hua had already caught up to him. Xiao Hua rubbed his hands together, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth around Liang Yu began to condense, and his magic power was also imprisoned. "Senior Xiao, please spare my life." Liang Yu urged his magic power several times, wanting to cast a spell, but Xiao Hua's powerful earth condensation technique did not allow him to urge his true essence at all. Liang Yu immediately understood that Xiao Hua's cultivation was definitely not something he could compare to, and he immediately opened his mouth to beg for mercy. "In your next life." Xiao Hua sneered. He waved the yang leaf fan in his hand again, and a fire dragon also flew out, howling as it drowned Liang Yu. Ah! The bone-piercing pain caused Liang Yu to have no choice but to scream. His figure fell from midair, and in just a dozen breaths of time, he was burned until there was not a trace of him left. "Humph!" Xiao Hua snorted coldly. He was not in a hurry to take the storage pouch. Instead, he waved his hand, and the half-flying scissors floating in midair fell into his hand. At this time, the flying scissors had lost their brilliance, but the sharp blades still flashed with a cold light. "My goodness, what kind of magic weapon is this? It's actually so sharp." Xiao Hua praised inwardly. With a wave of his hand, Liang Yu's storage pouch flew over. But just as Xiao Hua took the intact storage pouch in his hand and wanted to check it, a divine sense swept over from afar, and then a slightly dignified voice sounded, "Which fellow Taoist is rashly making a rash move here? Are you not taking the warning of my Haoming city seriously?" Ah! Xiao Hua was shocked. His divine sense quickly swept over, and when he saw who it was, his expression changed several times. His hand was dissatisfied, and with a flick of his finger, a wisp of true samadhi fire flew out, landing on the corpses of Yan Yu, Jia Ming, and the others that were not destroyed in time. Then, his face was as calm as water. With another wave of his hand, Yan Yu and Jia Ming's storage pouches were also taken by him, and slowly flew into Xiao Hua's hand. Chapter 2071. Xiao Hua coldly stood in the air. The 4 storage bags flew in front of him, and the magic tool that looked like half a pair of scissors was also covered by his sleeve. He very calmly looked in the direction of where his divine sense had come from. A moment later, a late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator dressed in armor flew over with several Foundation Establishment and aura refining cultivators. This cultivator had clear facial features and looked rather Taoist. It was Haoming City's city guard captain, Yu Qin. Xiao Hua actually recognized one of the city guards he led. It was the aura refining cultivator he met outside Haoming City, Lu Qing. At this time, an aura refining city guard could actually follow behind Yu Qin. Obviously, the auspicious light stone played a big role. When Lu Qing saw Xiao Hua in front of him, his face also showed surprise. Compared to Lu Cheng's surprise, Yu Chen's shock was even more obvious. However, although Yu Chen's heart was overwhelmed with shock, his face was still calm. His figure only stopped when he was 10 feet away from Xiao Hua. After a slight hesitation, he looked at the few balls of samadhi true fire that had already burned out and narrowed his eyes. It was unknown what he was thinking in his heart. When he looked at Xiao Hua again, his eyes moved and swept over Yu Qin and the others. He calmly took the storage pouches one by one and tied them to his waist in succession, as if the others weren't in front of him. However, when he pointed at the formation token next to Yan Yu's disappeared corpse and slowly flew up, Yu Qin said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't you plan to give this old man an explanation?" He, Xiao Hua laughed and looked at the formation token. He said, "Although Captain Yu came late, you also saw the end. Do you need me to explain?" Yu Qin frowned slightly and said coldly, "This old man saw you kill other cultivators and didn't put the rules of my Haoming city in your eyes. That's why I asked. If it weren't for the fact that you're a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect and have met this old man once, this old man would have already taken you down." As he spoke, the formation plate had already flown into Xiao Hua's hand. Xiao Hua looked at it, then put it into his storage bag. He then scanned it with his divine will. His gaze once again looked several dozen feet away. The 5 fingers on his right hand slightly curled and grabbed at several spots in the void. Several formation plates flew out from the cliff and the stream and landed in Xiao Hua's hand. "Captain Yu, do you know what kind of array this is?" Xiao Hua shook the array disc in his hand and asked with a smile. When Yu Qin flew over, he had already sensed the traces of the 4-gate forbidden arrays, so he didn't dare to casually approach Xiao Hua. At this moment, when he saw Xiao Hua openly take out the array discs, his expression changed slightly. Hearing Xiao Hua's question, he pondered for a moment and shook his head. "This old man doesn't know how to set up arrays, so I don't know what kind of array this is." Xiao Hua's heart settled. With a wave of his hand, he put the disc array into his storage bag and said with a smile, "At this point, do you still need me to explain?" "Of course, fellow Taoist Xiao has to explain." Yu Qin laughed and clapped his hand. The pressure of a late Foundation establishment stage was released and pressed down on Xiao Hua from above. Otherwise, how can this old man? However, before he could finish speaking, he saw Xiao Hua's face turn cold. He clapped his hand and released the pressure of a mid-foundation establishment stage without hesitation. At the same time, he waved his other hand and the cloud-suppressing seal flew out of space. It made a buzzing sound in the air and a bronze light shot out like a sharp sword, quickly flying above Yu-Chin and the others. "How dare you?" Yu-Chin didn't say anything. A mid-foundation establishment stage cultivator behind him angrily shouted and flew up, about to release his pressure. Wait, at this moment, out of everyone's expectations, when Yu-Chen's pressure met Xiao Hua's, he immediately withdrew it. He shouted in a low voice and stopped the city guard's action. Yes. That city guard didn't dare to disobey and hurriedly bowed. However, his figure flew several feet and faced Xiao Hua, as if he wanted to surround him. Fellow Daoist Xiao, Yu-Chen withdrew his pressure, narrowed his eyes, and said, "My Haoming City has always handled matters fairly. Although all cultivators are prohibited from killing each other within Haoming City's sphere of influence, the grudges between ordinary cultivators won't be forcibly stopped. Especially for fellow Daoist Xiao." In this old man's opinion, fellow Daoist Xiao must have been ganged up on by many people. Moreover, fellow Daoist Zhao's magic power is outstanding. Instead, he killed 4 people in a formation. My Haoming City absolutely won't hold fellow Daoist Xiao responsible for this kind of matter. Seeing that Yu-Chin didn't ask clearly and pushed the cause of everything to the 4 cultivators he didn't see and cleared Xiao Hua's responsibility, Xiao Hua frowned slightly and said inwardly, "Could it be that this Yu-Chin is doing this for the sake of the 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain? Or is it because of my identity as a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect?" But he didn't seem to be like this just now. However, since Yu-Chen said so, Xiao Hua naturally pushed the boat with the current. Xiao Hua pointed his hand, and the cloud-suppressing seal flew back with a wang-wang sound. Xiao Hua caught it with his hand and nodded, saying, "Just as Captain Yu said, these 4 people don't know me at all. They actually set up an ambush here and wanted to take my life. I also know the rules of Haoming City, but my life was on the line, so I had no choice but to take action. If I have offended Haoming City in any way, please forgive me, Captain Yu." This old man knew it. Yu-Chen laughed. "The Imperial Thunder Sect is a famous sect. How could it go against my Haoming City? It must be someone else who schemed against fellow Daoist Xiao." This old man asked again and again just now, and this is the reason. "Well, since Captain Yu has already asked clearly, can I leave now? Can this Xiao leave now?" Xiao Hua didn't want to say another word to Yu-Chin, so he went straight to the point. "Of course," Yu-Chin said with a smile, "since fellow Daoist Xiao didn't violate the rules of my Haoming City, this old man has no right to keep fellow Daoist Xiao here." "Okay," Xiao Hua nodded and waved his hand. A few true samadhi fire flew out and burned the corpses of Yan Yu and the others. Then, he rose into the air and was about to fly in the direction of Haoming City. "Fellow Daoist Xiao." At this time, Yu-Chin spoke again. "What? Captain Yu, is there anything else?" Xiao Hua's figure froze, but no expression could be seen on his face. "Nothing." Yu-Chin said with a smile, "If fellow Daoist Xiao needs anything, you can send a message to me at any time. I believe I can still help fellow Daoist Xiao in Haoming City." Xiao Hua saw that Yu-Chin actually gave him a gentle attitude and was slightly stunned. He pondered for a while and cupped his hands, saying, "I know. If there's anything, I'll definitely ask Captain Yu for help." "Please." Yu-Chin stretched out his hand and motioned for Xiao Hua to go first. Xiao Hua didn't stand on ceremony and turned and flew away. Chapter 2072. When Xiaohua's figure disappeared, the middle stage Foundation Establishment city guard opened his mouth and said, "Captain why did you let Xiaohua go just like that?" He had killed 4 Foundation Establishment cultivators in this place. If the masters of these 4 cultivators come, what will happen to our Haoming city? Yuchen coldly glanced at the city guard and asked, "How do you know there were 4 Foundation Establishment cultivators?" A trace of pride flashed in the city guard's eyes, and he said with a smile, "If there were 4 Qi refinement cultivators, how could Xiaohua set up a formation to kill them? It must be because he couldn't defeat them, so he thought of using a formation." "Captain, didn't you see him easily take out the formation plate and other things?" Yang Ming, Yuchen sighed and said, "Your cultivation is good, and you have some brains, but do you know why you've always been under Shang Qinghe? That's because Shang Qinghe has the talent to flatter, not because of me." Yang Ming blurted out. Obviously, he already had resentment in his heart. If Shang Qinghe was here, he definitely wouldn't question this old man's decision. Yuchen sneered and waved his hand. "Let's go. We'll return to the city." But Yang Ming glanced at several places that were burned by Xiaohua and hesitated to speak. "None of you saw what happened today. If this old man sees it and divulges it, don't blame this old man for being impolite." Yuchen said coldly. "This old man doesn't dare." Everyone was terrified and bowed. "Also, this place, no one is to check it out. After 10 days, come back and inspect it." Yuchen's gaze swept across the valley, and he gave another order and flew up. Yuchen and the others disappeared. After a long time, Xiaohua's figure suddenly appeared on the foothills of a mountain. He looked in the direction of Haoming City and said to himself, "This Yuchen, what's going on? Why is he so partial to this young master? What is he afraid of? This young master really doesn't understand." Immediately, Xiaohua flew to the place where he killed Yan Yu and carefully looked for a long time. He didn't find any flaws, so he flew away again. In the distance, Yang Ming was carefully accompanying Yuchen, quietly listening to Yuchen's reprimand, although I didn't know that it was Xiaohua who set the trap to kill the 4 Foundation Establishment cultivators. "Elder Yu," Yang Ming whispered, "it seems I can't tell that there are 4 Foundation Establishment cultivators. Perhaps there were aura refining disciples as well. Or perhaps there is only 1 Foundation Establishment disciple?" Yuchen glanced at Yang Ming and smiled. "How do you know there are 4 cultivators? Or perhaps 5 or 6 cultivators? That can't be. Xiaohua only has 4 storage bags in his hands. It should be 4 cultivators." Yang Ming replied without hesitation. "Since you know that there are 4 storage bags, didn't you notice the quality of the 4 storage bags?" Yuchen said with a smile. "This." Yang Ming was dumbfounded. How could he notice so many details? It's easy to be a Foundation Establishment middle stage cultivator, as long as you have enough cultivation. Yuchen sighed and said, "But if you want to be a Haoming City guard captain, you have to have enough cultivation and not know how to observe details. You don't know how to observe people's expressions. You don't know how to. Alas, left and right, there are many things you need to know." Yuchen waved his hand. "Although I can't carefully examine the quality of these 4 storage bags, I can see that they are definitely not aura refining cultivators. Therefore, the owners of these 4 storage bags must be Foundation Establishment cultivators." "And I understand." Yang Ming's face showed a look of admiration. "Moreover, think about it. If Xiaohua used a formation to set up an ambush and wanted to kill 4 Foundation Establishment cultivators, do you think these 4 Foundation Establishment cultivators would be Foundation Establishment early stage?" Yuchen said again, "Don't forget, Xiaohua just came into contact with this old man's spiritual pressure. His spiritual pressure, was beyond this old man's expectations. It was actually Foundation Establishment Middle Stage. Ah. Foundation Establishment Middle Stage. Yang Ming was shocked. This Xiaohua actually knows how to conceal his cultivation? This old man only saw that his cultivation was Foundation Establishment Early Stage. And this should be a secret cultivation concealment technique passed down in the Imperial Thunder sect. Yu Chen's eyes flickered, and he said, a Foundation Establishment Middle Stage used a formation to set up an ambush. Among the 4 cultivators with similar cultivation, 2 of them should be Foundation Establishment Middle Stage. Even 4 of them should be Foundation Establishment Middle Stage. With the strength of one person and the power of a formation, he actually killed 4 Foundation Establishment Middle Stage cultivators. Yang Ming was shocked. This Xiaohua's strength, isn't it comparable to the edge of Foundation Establishment Late Stage? This old man doesn't know what kind of formation Xiaohua set up, and I can't judge Xiaohua's true strength. Yu Qin shook his head. However, if I say that he has the strength of Foundation Establishment Late Stage, I think I overestimated him. However, seeing that he removed the formation in front of this old man and wasn't afraid of this old man's reproach, this old man believes that he must have some kind of backup plan. The shock on Yang Ming's face was difficult to hide, and he once again said with admiration, this old man will never forget Captain's teachings. This old man really didn't think so much. Hee, Yu Chen laughed. It's also a great advantage for you to concentrate on cultivation. As long as you improve your cultivation, these insignificant things are nothing. Yes, this old man knows. This old man will follow Captain's lead. Yang Ming saluted and smiled apologetically. Just based on Captain's approachability, I think Xiaohua will be grateful to Captain's actions in his heart. If there is anything in the future, it will also be a small help. Hee, I hope so. Yu Qin nodded and said, although my Haoming city is powerful, it's nothing in the eyes of the Imperial Thunder sect. As a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, Xiaohua naturally won't put this old man in his eyes. However, he has these things that can't be considered as blackmail in my eyes. Under this old man's blind friendship, he will definitely. Hearing Yu Qin say something that can't be considered as evidence, it didn't mean that Yu Qin had finished speaking. Yang Ming suddenly realized something and even stuttered a little as he said, Captain, you mean that the 4 people that Xiaohua killed? Shoot, Yu Chen's face changed, and he shook his head and said, I didn't say anything. This Yu's divine sense also didn't see which sect the 4 people Xiaohua killed were from. Yes, this old man understands. Yang Ming's face also tightened, and he said hurriedly. But immediately, Yang Ming's eyes turned again, and he whispered, Old Yu, we all believe that Xiaohua set up a formation to kill the 4 cultivators. But what if it is as Xiaohua said, the 4 cultivators set up a formation to ambush Xiaohua? Hee, if Xiaohua has such strength, he can still kill the 4 Foundation Establishment cultivators under the formation and not let any of the 4 cultivators escape. Yu Qin sneered, then Xiaohua is not Xiaohua, he should be a golden core cultivator. Yes, this old man understands. Yang Ming smiled apologetically. If Xiaohua has such strength, Captain's friendship is even more valuable. If he has the cultivation of a golden core cultivator, can we still escape from his hands? Yu Qin snorted coldly, I'm afraid that we will be the first to leave, right? However, speaking of this, Yu Chen's heart moved. He hesitated for a moment and sent a voice transmission to Yang Ming. No way. After listening to Yu Chen's voice transmission, Yang Ming's face showed horror. Let's go and take a look first. Yu Qin ordered, just based on a few words just now, this old man can't really befriend Xiaohua. If I can find something, it can also be useful to this old man. A disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, a cultivator who can easily kill the same level, no matter how much it costs, we should befriend him. Yes, this old man understands. Yang Ming cupped his hands and prepared to leave. Remember, be secretive, don't let Xiaohua find out anything. Yu Qin said worriedly. This old man understands. Yang Ming nodded and said, this old man can still do this well. And, after Yang Ming flew away, Yu Qin put his hands behind his back, looked into the distance, and sighed in his heart, Xiaohua, Xiaohua, this old man is humble to befriend you, don't let this old man down. How could Xiaohua think that killing Yan Yu would cause Yu Qin to befriend him? At this time, Xiaohua was sitting cross-legged on the futon, holding the scissor-like magic weapon in his hand. He immersed his divine thought into a jade slip, and his face showed joy. Ha! Soaring dragon scissors. Xiaohua laughed out loud, opened his eyes, and looked at the magic weapon with joy. This young master's dream execution is now breeding the primordial spirit, so it can't be used for the time being. This cloud-suppressing seal is indeed powerful, but I always feel that it's not powerful enough. Now that I have obtained such a powerful magic weapon, how can I not be happy? Then, Xiaohua's eyes flashed with a sharp color, and he sneered, Yan Yu, Liang Yu, and the others are just clowns. They say that they are avenging their nephew, but their goal is this young master's storage bag. Now, it's good that they went for wool and came back shorn. Instead, they gave this young master a magic weapon. Unfortunately, this young master's hands and feet are a little slow. It actually attracted Yu Qin, who used pressure to force out this young master's true cultivation. This secret method of stealing the sky and swapping the sun seems to be not perfect. But, what's wrong with knowing it? Xiaohua thought proudly, it's just a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. If it weren't for the captain of the city guards of Haoming City, this young master wouldn't have any scruples. As long as it has any rebellious thoughts, this young master will kill it all the same. Then, Xiaohua flicked his hand, and a spell seal hit the half of the soaring dragon scissors. The soaring dragon scissors suddenly flashed, and a golden light burst out like the sun after the clouds opened, illuminating the entire cave. Great! Seeing the soaring dragon scissors in such a strange state, which was completely different from when Liang Yu used it, Xiaohua's face showed joy. He cheered, and the spell seals in his hand continued to hit out. Along with Xiaohua's sacrificial refining, the flood dragon on the soaring dragon scissors gradually appeared until it was 1 foot long. Then, like a dragon soaring to the 9 heavens, it flew in the cave and circled around Xiaohua. After several hours, even with Xiaohua's cultivation, he was still somewhat dispirited. Xiaohua opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood on the soaring dragon scissors. A blood-like cold light flashed, and the originally closed eyes of the soaring flood dragon suddenly opened. That cold light actually shot out from the flood dragon's eyes. Moreover, the flood dragon's figure rapidly shrank, and quickly returned to the original appearance of the soaring dragon scissors, floating in front of Xiaohua's eyes. Chapter 2073. The Tingjiao shears was still the original Tingjiao shears, but the eyes on the handle had already opened. Faintly, there was an uncontrollable sharpness that seemed to want to stand out from the Tingjiao shears. Xiaohua opened his mouth, and the Tingjiao shears flew into his mouth and was sent into his Buddhist heart. He secretly smiled and said, "Looks like this young master got another treasure." This Tingjiao shears was accidentally obtained by Liang Yu, not a magic treasure taught by Sun Yan. Moreover, the Tingjiao shears is divided into yin and yang sides. Liang Yu only got the incomplete yang side. Just with this half of the Tingjiao shears, this young master already feels like a tiger that has grown wings. It is even more powerful than the dream-killing flying sword. When I get the other half of the Tingjiao shears in the future, with the combination of yin and yang, I'm afraid that even a middle-stage gold core cultivator would be killed by this young master, right? Xiao Lang, Xiao Lang. At this moment, Shue's exclamation came from outside. Xiao Hua didn't have time to look at the other storage pouches. He swept it with his divine sense, and his face also showed panic. He responded, "Wife, don't worry." As Xiao Hua's figure flew out, he saw that Shui was already standing in front of the pill furnace, looking at the constantly fluctuating furnace with some panic. Boom! It seemed like the lid of the furnace was about to be lifted. The phantoms of 2 male and female lightning beasts flew out from the pill furnace, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as they floated above the pill furnace. The 2 lightning beast phantoms were about a foot tall. As soon as they appeared, it was as if they had seen an irreconcilable enemy. They flapped their wings and pounced on each other. Quick! Xiao Hua didn't have time to watch the 2 phantoms fight. He formed hand seals and hit the pill furnace one after another. The 3-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace was originally swaying left and right in the midst of the fight between the phantoms, and it was about to collapse. As Xiao Hua's hand seals were inserted, it slowly stabilized. Seeing that the pill furnace was stable, Xiao Hua flicked his hand, and several samadhi true fire flew out and fell into the pill furnace. Shwa! Several brilliant lights flew out from the cauldron and landed on the 2 Thunder Beasts phantoms. The Thunder Beasts phantoms suddenly expanded and became 2 feet tall. As the Lightning Beast silhouette grew bigger, the heaven and earth spirit energy within the cave was absorbed by the silhouette, causing the sound of wind to fall into it. Alright, at this moment, Xiao Hua's expression was somewhat relaxed. He knew that right now was the time when the yin and yang of the male and female lightning beasts' blood fused. It was the most crucial moment. Countless Shui family ancestors had failed to refine the Ling Lei Dan at this moment. Therefore, he didn't dare to be careless. He released his spiritual will and observed carefully. The 2 Thunder Beast phantoms were evenly matched, and neither could do anything to the other. After fighting for several breaths, they suddenly raised their heads at the same time, pounded their chests with their fists, and suddenly rushed towards each other. Right now. Joy appeared on Xiao Hua's face. He stretched out his left arm and grabbed at the air with his 5 fingers. It was as if he was grabbing something from the pill furnace. As Xiao Hua raised his arm, he spat out a mouthful of true essence, and a black and white net flew out from the pill furnace. One on the left and one on the right, it covered the male and female lightning beast phantoms. Combined, Xiao Hua uttered an incantation, and his hands continuously formed seals. The 2 phantoms originally collided with each other, and under the adhesion of the black and white net, they gradually merged into one. Although this process only took a few breaths, the more the 2 phantoms merged, the greater the repulsive force between them. Separating and merging caused Xiao Hua to consume a lot of magic power. Combine, Xiao Hua shouted once again, and a wisp of faint scarlet-red spirit fire suddenly flew out. It circled around the illusory figure, and all of the repulsive force from before disappeared. With a loud bang, the entire alchemy furnace shook violently, and the 2 illusory figures combined together as they wished, and were absorbed into the alchemy furnace. Granny Xiao Hua's figure slightly swayed in midair. He seemed to be somewhat lacking in magic power. Looking at the 3-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace that was as quiet as a virgin, he couldn't help but groan, what kind of cultivator can refine this Ling Lei Dan so easily? This young master's alchemy technique is completely different from Xiaoyu continent, and my magic power is also close to gold core. Why can't I refine this thing easily? No wonder Shue's heart is tangled. How could her ancestor refine this Ling Lei Dan? Husband. Seeing Xiao Hua flying in the air and the pill furnace returning to its calm state, Shui in the distance shouted in a low voice, "Is there a mistake?" He, Xiaohua turned his head and said with a slight smile, in your husband's hands, how could there be the slightest mistake? Wife, don't worry. In another 10 days, this Linglei Dan will be successfully refined, and it will also be the day you build your foundation. Really? Shue's face showed surprise, and she couldn't help but offer her cherry lips considerately to Xiaohua. The two of them were affectionate for a moment, and Shui showed hesitation again and said in a low voice, Husband, the cultivation method you taught me. I'm still a little unfamiliar with it. These meridians still haven't expanded. I think it's better not to take the Linglei Dan first. It won't be too late to take it when I feel confident, right? Xiaohua thought for a moment and said with a smile, it's all up to you. Your husband will accompany you. Whether you build your foundation in Haoming City today or in the Sea of Heaven tomorrow, your husband will stand guard for you. Thank you, husband, Shui chuckled, her face full of happiness. At this moment, Xiaohua's brows slightly wrinkled again, and he swept his divine sense outside the abode. Ha! Why is this guy here? Xiaohua saw the person outside the abode, and he couldn't help but be surprised. Husband. Who is it? Could it be the fire Qilin again? Shui saw Xiaohua's unkind expression and asked in a low voice. It's not the fire Qilin, Xiaohua shook his head and said, it's Haoming City Guard Captain Yu Qin. Shui was also puzzled, but she looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, I'm going to cultivate by myself. You can send him away yourself. After saying that, without waiting for Xiaohua to answer, she walked to a corner, sat cross-legged, and closed her eyes to comprehend. Xiaohua knew that Shui didn't want to ask more about him, so he smiled slightly, went out of the pill room, opened all the restrictions, and went outside the abode. On the side of the abode, Yu Qin stood there casually without any city guards. Xiaohua opened the abode and said with a smile, Captain Yu, I haven't seen you for a few days again. May I know what business you have in my abode today? Yu Qin released his divine sense. Seeing that there were no other cultivators around, he cupped his hands and said, I didn't come to your abode for a special visit. I wonder if fellow Daoist Xiao can let me in for a chat. Ha! Hearing that Yu Qin actually said that he had nothing to do and wanted to enter the abode to talk, Xiaohua was slightly stunned. His mind turned quickly, guessing Yu Qin's intention. I wonder if he saw through the matter of me killing Yan Yu. Fellow Daoist Xiao, don't misunderstand. Seeing Xiaohua hesitate, how could Yu Qin not know what Xiaohua was thinking? He hurriedly said, I just saw fellow Daoist Zhao's profound magic power and wanted to make friends with you, so I came to talk to fellow Daoist Xiao. Chapter 2074. Profound Magic Power. You want to make friends with him? Xiaohua was even more stunned. Ever since he started cultivating, all the cultivators he met were either using him or forcing him to do things. How could he make friends with someone? Most of the people he had some friendship with were related to him. Someone unrelated to him like Yu Qin, this was the first time. However, Xiaohua still cupped his hands and smiled. My cultivation is shallow. I've never met a fellow Daoist like fellow Daoist Yu, please forgive me. It's fine. Yu Qin was comforted when he heard Xiaohua call him fellow Daoist Yu. Aren't you going to invite me in? Fellow Daoist Yu, please. Xiaohua stepped aside and invited Yu Qin into the cave. Yu Qin was only at the late stage of foundation establishment. Xiaohua had already killed late-stage foundation establishment cultivators when he was at the peak of qi refinement. He wasn't afraid of Yu Qin having any other thoughts. Where's fellow Daoist Shui? Yu Qin entered the cave and didn't release his divine sense. Fellow Daoist Yu, please sit. Xiaohua invited Yu Chen to sit and replied. Junior sister is in seclusion. She's looking for a chance to reach Foundation establishment. She can't come out to meet you. Not bad, Yu Chen sighed. He watched Xiaohua take out some spirit fruits from his space. He casually picked one and ate while saying, "You disciples of large sects have an advantage. Your cultivation is guaranteed. You can't compare to us wild fox cultivators. Look, your junior sister is about to reach Foundation establishment. As her senior brother, you're accompanying her from thousands of miles away. I'm really envious. Hee, fellow Daoist Yu, please don't laugh at me." Xiaohua took out some spirit wine and smiled. "I got this from somewhere else. I don't know where it came from. Fellow Daoist Yu, please have a taste." "Oh. It's not from your Imperial Thunder sect." Yu Chen was stunned. However, he still picked up the wine cup and took a sip. "I've drunk this spirit wine before. It seems to be Tianmen Mountain's Huang family's clear wine." Xiaohua thought for a moment, then said with a smile, "This Xiao doesn't like spirit wine, but this thing seems to be." The two of them then chatted for a while. Yu Chen patted his storage bag and took out a jade slip. He handed it to Xiaohua and said, "Fellow Daoist Xiao, I ate your spirit fruit and drank your spirit wine. This is a little bit of this old man's sincerity. I hope fellow Daoist Xiao can accept it." "Oh. What is this?" Xiaohua looked at the jade strip and asked somewhat strangely. Yu Chen smiled and said, "Won't fellow Daoist Xiao know if you take a look?" When Xiaohua took the jade slip and immersed his divine sense into it, he couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. Moreover, his eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness. Yu Chen didn't panic at all and said with a smile, "This old man wants to be on good terms with fellow Daoist Xiao, so I naturally have to understand fellow Daoist Xiao. I just so happen to be the captain of Haoming City's city guards. Some things might be difficult for others, but it's as easy as flipping my palm for me. However, fellow Daoist Xiao, don't worry, this old man knows the severity of the matter." This old man didn't inquire about the rogue cultivator who sold the body refinement cultivation method. Moreover, according to this old man's knowledge, it's impossible for this old man to inquire about the situation. Xiaohua's eyes turned slightly, and he returned the jade slip to Yu Chen and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist Yu's painstaking efforts, this Xiao appreciates. However, this isn't what this Xiao needs." "Ah. Doesn't fellow Daoist Xiao need a body refinement cultivation method?" Yu Chen took the jade slip and said, "This cultivation method is the best cultivation method in my Haoming City's Jade Field Paradise." Fellow Daoist Yu, Xiaohua pondered for a moment and said with a smile, "Since fellow Daoist Yu has such intentions, then this Xiao won't hide it from fellow Daoist. This Xiao doesn't need a body refinement cultivation method, but a bone tempering cultivation method." Bone tempering. When Yu Chen heard this, his face revealed a disappointed expression. He put away the jade slip and said resentfully, "From what this old man has seen, I really haven't heard of any bone tempering cultivation method. This old man is somewhat ignorant and inexperienced. Bone tempering cultivation methods are rare in the first place." Xiaohua said with a smile, "This Xiao only has a divine ability that requires the assistance of this cultivation method. Otherwise, this Xiao absolutely wouldn't have thought of it. It's normal that fellow Daoist Yu doesn't know about it." "Okay," Yu Chen said with a smile, "since I know that fellow Daoist Xiao needs a bone tempering cultivation method, this you will help fellow Daoist Xiao look for it in Haoming City." Xiaohua was overjoyed when he heard this. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your kindness, fellow Daoist Yu. In fact, there's no need to be restricted to Haoming City. As long as there's news of bone-tempering cultivation methods in Xiaoyu continent, this Xiao will be endlessly grateful. This you understands. Yu Qin nodded. Immediately, Xiao Hua's heart moved again. He clapped his hands, took out the soaring dragon shears, and asked, "Fellow Daoist Yu, have you seen this thing before?" Yu Qin didn't take it. He only scanned it with his divine sense and shook his head, saying, "This Yu hasn't seen it before." However, seeing that this magic treasure is incomplete, fellow Daoist Xiao means. Yes, fellow Daoist Yu, please pay attention. If there's news of this magic treasure, please inform this Xiao. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Okay, fellow Daoist Xiao, please rest assured. This you will help you pay attention. When Yu Qin saw that Xiao Hua entrusted this matter to him without any hesitation, he was overjoyed. He knew that this trip wasn't in vain. He made friends with a cultivator with unlimited potential, so he immediately patted his chest and said with a smile. Yes, fellow Daoist Yu, Xiao Hua thought. He waved his hand, took out a few jade boxes, and placed them in front of Yu Qin. He said with a smile, fellow Daoist Yu came prepared, which made this Xiao a little nervous. This Xiao prepared these spiritual herbs for future use. Today, I'll give them to fellow Daoist Yu as a gift for our first meeting. When Yu Qin saw that Xiao Hua was so generous, he was overjoyed. He waved his hand and said, fellow Daoist Xiao, this Yu is happy to see you. How could I covet your Imperial Thunder sect spiritual herbs? Fellow Daoist's way of doing things makes this Yu a little uneasy. Fellow Daoist Xiao, please take these things back. This is this Xiao's goodwill. Fellow Daoist Yu, don't be in a hurry to refuse. Xiao Hua said with a smile, let's take a look first and see if it's beneficial to your cultivation. If it's not useful, then it won't be too late to refuse. Okay, Yu Qin didn't mind. He didn't think that a middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator could take out spiritual herbs that could move his heart. Moreover, Haoming City was a city of auctions. What kind of spiritual herbs hadn't he seen before? However, in order to not let Xiao Hua lose face, Yu Qin still decided to take a look. Whether or not they were useful to him, he would take them back first. However, when Yu Qin opened a jade box and saw the spiritual herbs inside, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. His eyes emitted a trace of divine light. He looked around and said in a low voice, Xiao. Fellow Daoist Xiao, these spiritual herbs. I'm afraid they're over 10,000 years old. When he saw Xiao Hua's smiling expression, he hurriedly opened the other jade boxes. After taking a look, the joy on his face became even stronger. He looked at Xiao Hua with a complicated gaze. With a wave of his hand, he put away the jade boxes into his storage pouch. He sighed and said, I won't say anything else. Fellow Daoist Xiao is really considerate. These spiritual herbs are exactly what I need. If I were to be unreasonable, I would have come here in vain today. Great! Xiao Hua also clapped his hands and said with a smile, fellow Daoist Yu has such a magnanimous heart. I'm relieved. Yu Qin thought for a moment and said, fellow Daoist Xiao, I'm still a bit uneasy after taking your spiritual herbs. The matter you mentioned just now is a bit tricky. I'm afraid it might not be effective in a short time. Do you have any other difficult matters? If I can help you, please don't hesitate to tell me. Hearing this, Xiao Hua's heart moved. He clapped his hands and took out a blank jade slip. He wrote some things on it and handed it to Yu Qin with a smile. I was just about to tell fellow Daoist Yu that these things are exactly what I need. Because I'm not familiar with the auction in Haoming City, I only participated in the auction for nascent soul cultivators and foundation establishment cultivators. I didn't come across these things. If it's convenient for fellow Daoist Yu, please help me gather them. I will be eternally grateful. Yu-Chin took the jade slip, glanced at it, and said with a smile, so it's some materials for refining tools. They're not too rare. Fellow Daoist Xiao, you just have to wait for a day or two. Xiao Hua was secretly delighted, but there was nothing special on his face. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your trouble, fellow Daoist. I'll give the spirit stones to fellow Daoist right away." No need, no need. Yu-Chin hurriedly waved his hand. These materials don't require many spirit stones. Just take it as a gift from me to fellow Daoist Xiao. After discussing the matter, Yu-Chin said a few more words to Xiao Hua before leaving. After seeing Yu-Chin off, Xiao Hua secretly said, "No wonder cultivators pay attention to communication. Although I knew a thing or two before, I never got any benefits because of it. It turns out that a person's strength is limited. Everyone has their own sphere of influence. If everyone interacts with each other, many difficult things may become easy." When Yu-Chin saw that I was able to kill 4 cultivators of the same level, he wanted to make friends with me. Perhaps it would be beneficial to his cultivation in the future. And I can rely on Yu-Chen's power to get information that I can't find. It's really 2 benefits in one fell swoop. It seems that completely concealing my cultivation is not a good thing. Occasionally letting others see my true strength and getting the respect and recognition of others is also beneficial to my cultivation in the future. Immediately, Xiao Hua sat cross-legged again and took out the storage bags of Yan Yu, Liang Yu, and the others. His divine sense swept through them, and he couldn't help but be surprised. Another 3 days later, Yu-Chin came to visit as promised and gave a medium-sized storage bag to Xiao Hua. Inside were the various materials that Xiao Hua needed to repair the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiao Hua thanked Yu-Chin with a satisfied expression on his face. However, Yu-Chin didn't get the slightest bit of information about the soaring dragon scissors and the bone-tempering technique. However, according to Yu-Chin, he begged an elder who was on good terms with him in Haoming City to inquire about the information from the city lord, Daoist Master Yao Hong. He was afraid that there would be some news after 10 days. This was naturally still beyond Xiao Hua's expectations. He didn't expect Yu-Chin to actually spend so much capital and trouble Daoist Master Yao Hong for his matter. Moreover, the 81-day time limit for refining the High Thunder Pill would expire in 10 days. He naturally wouldn't leave Haoming City in a hurry. It was normal for him to wait for 10 days, regardless of whether there was any news or not. After seeing Yu-Chin off, Xiao Hua checked the materials used to refine the cloud-suppressing seal again, and looked at the refining technique to make sufficient preparations for refining the cloud-suppressing seal. Chapter 2075. Rise. Xiao Hua's 10 fingers opened slightly, and his spiritual power faintly penetrated into the 3-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace. A clear sound came from inside the furnace, and it was actually the sound of a thunder beast roaring towards the sky. Moreover, a rich fragrance spread throughout the entire alchemy room. Xue Xue stood far away in a corner of the alchemy room, and her eyes revealed endless admiration and pride. Looking at Xiao Hua, who was about to condense the pill, there was a trace of uneasiness behind that joyful expression. Right at this time, Xiao Hua chuckled and looked back at Xue Xue. He formed a spell with both hands. The spell was very obscure, and the fluctuation of spiritual power was extremely strange. It was very different from the alchemy methods seen in the Xiaoyu continent. Fortunately, Xue Xue didn't know alchemy at all, and there was no other strange expression in her eyes except for admiration. However, what puzzled Xue Xue was that as Xiao Hua formed a spell, the slightly vibrating alchemy furnace began to stabilize, and the hissing sound also became smaller. However, at the same time, the fragrance in the room also disappeared, as if it was restrained inside the alchemy furnace. This was very different from the alchemy techniques she had heard of. When Xiaohua waved his hand, a faint black and white brilliance flashed above the alchemy furnace, and Xiaohua's face was slightly surprised. "Ha! This Ling Lei pill, can't it be pulled out?" Xiaohua muttered in a low voice, and didn't dare to hesitate. He immediately waved his hand, and the flame under the alchemy furnace was immediately extinguished. He waved his hand, and a jade slip appeared in his hand, and he carefully read it. After a long time, Xiaohua put away the jade slip, but his brows didn't loosen. Husband Shueshue saw this and asked in a low voice, "Is there a mistake?" Xiaohua smiled and said, "What mistake?" "It's just the process of refining the Ling Lei pill. It's a little different from what your husband knows. Your husband originally wanted to refine a few pills at once. Who knew that you could only refine one pill, which really makes your husband unhappy?" He Shueshue covered her mouth and laughed. "Husband is really greedy. This Ling Lei pill is a heaven-defying item. My Shui family's ancestors spent a lot of effort to refine one pill, and you want to refine a few pills at once? Is this a joke? This concubine will be satisfied with just one." Xiaohua's mouth curled into a sly smile. "My wife's problem has been solved, but what about our children? Husband still wants to leave some benefits for them." Shueshue's face flushed red when she heard this. She giggled and said, "With an alchemist like you, whenever the children need it, you can just refine it." But within Shueshue's charming smile, there was still a trace of gloom, far from what others could see. "Wife is right." Xiaohua exaggeratedly slaps his forehead. "If there is one child, this husband will refine it once. If there are 10 children, this husband will refine it 10 times. It really isn't a big deal." Not shy at all. Shueshue was abnormally shy, like a real young lady. After a short while, Shueshue asked again, "That's right. Husband, is the soaring lightning pill done?" That's fine." Xiaohua nodded and said, "The pill is already done. Since you can't pull the pill, wait a moment, this husband will directly collect the pill." "Good," Shueshue said with a faint smile. "After refining the soaring lightning pill, this concubine will follow husband to QC. There should be enough time to comprehend that wonderful technique along the way." Xiaohua heard this and thought of another matter. To go to QC, one must pass through Ink-Cloud Black Forest. Xiaohua was very clear about the dangers of Ink-Cloud Black Forest. If there wasn't any special passage, it would be very difficult for Shueshue, who was a refiner, to pass through. At this moment, Xiaohua felt some movement outside the cave. He laughed in his heart. "Good, whoever wants to come can come. This is a good opportunity to ask fellow Daoist Yu if he has any shortcuts." However, when he released his divine sense and saw the person outside the cave, his face showed displeasure. The person outside was the Fire Qilin of Ardent Fire Mountain. "Wife, the Fire Qilin has come. I wonder what's the matter?" Xiaohua said in a low voice. Shueshue nodded slightly and said, "Husband, you can just send him away. No matter what, husband will make the decision." "Okay," Xiaohua replied and went outside the cave. The Fire Qilin heard the noise and saw Xiaohua come out. Its gaze was still looking behind Xiaohua, but it was disappointed that Shueshue wasn't behind Xiaohua. "Where is fellow Daoist Shui?" the Fire Qilin asked. "I will let fellow Daoist know," Xiaohua said neither arrogantly nor humbly. "My wife is in closed-door cultivation and can't see guests. I wonder if fellow Daoist has something to say." "Fellow Daoist Xiao," the Fire Qilin asked sincerely, "this fire knows that you and Shueshue aren't dual cultivating, and this fire will be returning to Ardent Fire Mountain with grandfather today. This fire came today just to see fellow Daoist Shui. Fellow Daoist fire is leaving. Xiao Hua was somewhat surprised and asked curiously, the auction just ended a few dozen days ago and the elders of Ardent Fire Mountain are returning? Yes, something strange happened in Ardent Fire Mountain. Grandfather has to hurry back. The Fire Qilin was somewhat absent-minded. It didn't care about the advice of the three elders of Ardent Fire Mountain and casually said the reason, fellow Daoist Xiao, this fire just wants to see fellow Daoist Shui. It's fine even if we don't talk. Sorry, fellow Daoist fire, you should go back, Xiao Hua said after pondering for a moment. Chapter 2076. Shui. Fellow Daoist Shui, Fire Qilin saw that Shui seemed to be unable to complete his sentence. What other thoughts do I have? I naturally know what you're thinking. I just want to see fellow Daoist Shui before leaving Haoming City. My blazing fire mountain is thousands of miles away from the Imperial Thunder Sept, but this is nothing. I can be considered to have cultivated successfully now. If I wholeheartedly want to see fellow Daoist, this distance is nothing. But, how can this distance compare to the distance in my heart? Even if I'm facing fellow Daoist Shui now, I know that the distance in my heart is greater than the entire Dawn Rain continent. I can't surpass this distance even if I cultivate for a lifetime. I just want to see fellow Daoist Shui once, just once. These words were said with deep feelings, and even Xiao Hua was slightly moved. But Shui didn't wait for Fire Qilin to finish speaking and asked indifferently, since Junior has already come out, it can be considered as meeting Senior. Senior, is there anything else? No. Nothing else. Fire Qilin was like a stunned goose as he answered. Well, since we've already met and Senior has nothing else, Junior will return. Shui glanced at Fire Hibiscus behind Fire Qilin and said, Junior thanks Senior Hibiscus for taking care of me in the past. After speaking, she turned and left without waiting for Fire Hibiscus to speak. Fellow Daoist Xiao, Fire Hibiscus had an apologetic look on her face as she cupped her hands and said, I didn't plan to come and bid farewell to fellow Daoist, but I saw cousin coming over and was afraid that something had happened, so I followed. Since there's nothing else, I'll return with cousin. I hope to see fellow Daoist Xiao again in the future. Well, I even hope that fellow Daoist Xiao and sister Shui can get married soon. Thank you for your auspicious words, Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, I can't send fellow Daoist off, please forgive me. It's fine fellow Daoist, please return. Fire Hibiscus glanced at Fire Qilin who was in a daze and said with a bitter smile. Then, Xiao Hua turned and returned, sealing the cave abode. Fire Qilin actually stood there in a daze for the time it took to burn an incense before leaving quietly. Wife, why did you say those words just now? Truly inappropriate. Xiao Hua watched the Fire Qilin leave and grumbled in a low voice. Hee, husband, if I don't say that, how can I make that Fire Qilin give up? Shui laughed. I'm just saying, why take it so seriously? I just don't feel good. Xiao Hua shook his head. Forget it, let's not talk about it anymore. The Ling Lei pill should be done, right? Shui urged. This concubine is looking forward to it. All right, Xiao Hua's expression was greatly refreshed when he heard Shui mention the Ling Lei pill. He said, I will keep the Ling Lei pill now. We should also prepare to leave Haoming City. In this Haoming City, it's really a little aggrieved. Under Shui's caress, Xiao Hua once again entered the alchemy room. At this time, the alchemy room was very quiet. Occasionally, there would be a slight sound coming from the alchemy furnace, like the chirping of birds or the swimming of fish. Listening to this sound was like the sound of nature. Moreover, the entire alchemy room was restored to its previous aura. The rich fragrance had completely disappeared. If one smelled it carefully, perhaps one could smell a trace of it when one got close to the alchemy furnace. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over and knew that it was the best time to collect the pill. Therefore, he signaled Shui to stay away from the alchemy furnace. He took a deep breath and mobilized the true essence in his body. Spiritual power surged into his fingers, and he slowly launched a series of alchemy techniques. The techniques hit the alchemy furnace. At first, there was no movement. After a while, the alchemy furnace emitted a faint brilliance. When Xiaohua waved his hand, the top of the three-legged vermilion bird and phoenix pattern furnace opened. With a soft sound, a dazzling brilliance flashed. A cloud like the shadow of a thunder beast was born from the alchemy furnace, and there was a gray flash in the cloud. "Collect," Xiaohua scolded softly. A real shadow flashed in his hand, and he launched a series of alchemy techniques on the cloud. However, the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was attracted by the techniques, and it actually formed small hurricanes around the cloud. These hurricanes rotated around the cloud layer and slowly absorbed the cloud. The shadow of the thunder beast also slowly shrunk and was absorbed by the gray flash. With a "hapa" sound, there seemed to be some lightning in the void, and it lingered around the already formed Ling Lei pill and entered it. Great, seeing that the lightning disappeared with the sound, and a thumb-sized Ling Lei pill rotated slightly in the air, Xiaohua laughed loudly. He knew that the Ling Lei pill was finally completed. With a wave of his hand, the Ling Lei pill fell into his hand. "Ha! It seems to be different from what was recorded in the jade slip." Xiaohua's gaze swept across the gray Ling Lei pill. His divine sense was also blocked by the surface of the Ling Lei pill, and he couldn't help but be a little surprised. However, in his heart, he faintly felt that this Ling Lei pill formula was the real Ling Lei pill. Husband, seeing Xiaohua holding the pill in his hand, Shue's face was hard to suppress the joy, and she whispered, "Is the Ling Lei pill completed?" "Yes," Xiaohua waved his hand, and the Ling Lei pill flew to Shui. But he said, "However, it is different from what was recorded in the jade slip." "Oh." Sure enough. Shui received the Ling Lei pill, and with her eyes and divine sense, she nodded and said, "According to what was recorded in the jade slip, the Ling Lei pill has a strange fragrance, and there will be phantoms of lightning beasts in the surroundings, and there will even be miniature lightning beasts inside the pill." Xiaohua smiled bitterly, touched his nose and said, "Yes, and the Ling Lei pill should be half the size of a fist, far bigger than this. The color is also a little wrong." Shui continued, "It should be black and white threads intertwining." Speaking up to here, Shui realized something and quickly shut her mouth, put the Ling Lei pill into the jade bottle, and said with a smile, "This is already not bad." Husband only looked at the jade slip and refined the Ling Lei pill without anyone's guidance. This wife doesn't know what to say. Xiaohua didn't care about Shue's explanation, and after thinking for a while, he said, "This husband's pill refining method is different from what was recorded in the jade slip, or the pill refined is different. However, this husband believes that since it can be refined, this Ling Lei pill will definitely be useful. This wife doesn't doubt my husband." Shui pursed her lips and said with a smile, "However, this wife will wait until later to take it." "As you wish," Xiaohua nodded, "we will prepare to leave Bright Dawn City." "Don't, wait a few more days," Shui shook her head and said, "The disciples of the Ardent Fire Mountain might still be nearby, and if we encounter them, we won't be able to do anything, as my wife says." Xiaohua also didn't want to see the three elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain, so he nodded and agreed. On the third day, Yuchen came, and just as he sat down, he smiled and said to Xiaohua, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, this old man has failed you. Ha! Xiaohua originally saw the smile on Yu Chen's face, and thought that there was some whereabouts of the bone tempering technique, but Yu Chen actually said this, and he couldn't help but feel surprised. However, Xiaohua smiled and said, no matter, this thing is rare, and this Xiao didn't plan to make it easy. If fellow Daoist Yu found it so quickly, this Xiao would be puzzled again. Fellow Daoist Xiao, Yu Chen drank a mouthful of spiritual tea and said, this old man has failed you because this old man didn't get any accurate information from the city lord. Ah! Xiaohua laughed and clapped his hands, saying, so fellow Daoist Yu is joking with this Xiao. My city lord is a nascent soul cultivator, and his knowledge is 10,000 times better than ours. Although he doesn't know the whereabouts of the bone tempering technique, he has heard some rumors. Yu Chen smiled proudly. According to him, this bone tempering technique was left behind from ancient times, and it has long disappeared from the Dawn Rain continent. It should be around 1,000 years ago. He heard a senior occasionally mention that there was a record in the ancient records of a certain sect that there was an ancient race who refined their bodies and tempered their bones on the overseas Sunset Island. Sunset Island. Xiaohua said happily, isn't that the exact location? This old man also had the same idea. Yu Chen said with a smile, but the Kueha Sea is huge, and there are very few overseas cultivators. There is no island named Sunset Island among the few known in Haoming City. Oh, this is not good. Xiaohua said with a frown. Yes, the waves in the Kueha Sea are stable, but the overseas area is full of monstrous waves, and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth is scarce. How can we find this so-called Sunset Island? Yu Chen echoed, I think fellow Daoist Xiao should make other plans. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua shook his head and said, forget it, I promised junior sister that I would accompany her to the Kueha Sea. Since I'm going, I'll go and find her. If I don't go, I will have an inner demon in my heart. Fellow Daoist Xiao wants to go to the Kueha Sea. Yu Chen frowned and asked, fellow Daoist, don't forget that from Haoming City to the Kueha Sea, you have to pass through the Maozhou Black Forest. After passing through the Maozhou Black Forest, you have to cross the whole Meng country. Without a flying spiritual artifact, fellow Daoist Xiao and fellow Daoist Shui will encounter more than a little difficulty. Isn't this just for experience? Xiaohua said with a smile, if not, how can junior sister Shui build her foundation? Well, okay, Yu Chen nodded and clapped his hands. He took out a jade slip and said, this is the map of the Kueha Sea that I found in the Sutra Pavilion in Haoming City. If fellow Daoist Xiao insists on going, then take it. Oh, thank you so much, fellow Daoist Yu. Xiaohua was even more surprised. He bowed and thanked Yu Chen and reached out to take it. Xiaohua didn't look at it carefully. He scanned it with his spiritual sense and put it into his space. Then, he asked, fellow Daoist Yu, you came at the right time. I want to ask if there is a secret path through the Maozhou Black Forest in Haoming City. This. Yu Chen was a little embarrassed. There are several secret paths in Haoming City. However, because of the Maozhou Black Forest, these secret paths are all ineffective. We just found one recently, and it's not very stable. The danger inside is also unpredictable. That's good. Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, as long as there is a secret path, it will save me and junior sister Shui the trouble of going into the Maozhou Black Forest. As he spoke, he clapped his hands and took out a storage bag. This secret path must belong to Haoming City. These spirit stones are for me to buy information, so I won't make things too difficult for you, fellow Daoist Yu. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Chapter 2077. Well. Yu Qin looked at the storage bag and reached out to take it. He nodded and said, "This secret path is indeed a recent source of income in our Haoming city. It's specially managed by the elders, but I can't take it. As for the spiritual stones, I'll take them. There's more." Xiaohua waved his hand again, took out a jade bottle and handed it to Yu Qin. "This is to thank you for the sea map. Please accept it." Yu Qin wanted to refuse, but thinking of the spiritual herbs last time, he hesitated a little and took it first. When he opened the jade bottle, he was a little moved. The elixir inside was exactly what he needed to condense elixirs. Alas, forget it. Yu Qin smiled bitterly. "I didn't want to exchange the sea map for your elixir, but this elixir, in my eyes, the sea map is 100 times more precious than this Lingli pill. You don't have to be so polite." Xiaohua waved his hand and smiled. Yu Qin didn't refuse anymore. He took the Lingli pill and said, "Fellow practitioner Xiao, there are many practitioners coming to our Haoming city to participate in the auction, including the practitioners of Meng country. Many of them came from the Mo Bao land. Now the secret path is ineffective. If they want to go back to Meng country, they have to take a long detour or use the secret path in our Haoming city. Therefore, there are many practitioners who want to pass through the secret path. Our Haoming city has also collected a lot of spiritual stones to arrange for these practitioners to leave. I'll try my best to arrange for you to leave first, but I'm afraid that it will take half a year to make the arrangement now." "Ah. So long." Xiaohua was stunned, but he thought for a moment and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter. Now that I'm in your territory, do I have any scruples?" "Okay." Yu Qin nodded and got up. "It's not too late. I'll go back and arrange it. Fellow practitioner Xiao, you can cultivate first." After seeing Yu Qin off, Xiaohua explained the matter to Xue Xue and asked her to cultivate in the quiet room, while he himself went to the alchemy room. With a clap of his hand, he took out a storage pouch from the space and muttered to himself, "Since there's half a year of meditation time, it's exactly what I want." Yan Yu's storage pouch contains many medicinal pills and pill recipes used by Foundation establishment cultivators, and even some medicinal pills used by Golden Core cultivators. This young master will also take advantage of this time to take some medicinal pills and refine a few cauldrons of medicinal pills. Unfortunately, the Jade Slip has the pill formula for the Minghua pill, but it doesn't have the pill formula for the Elaine pill and the Hua Yuan pill. It's really too tight. Then, Xiaohua took out the clear flower pellet from his storage pouch and a drop of earth crystal yao milk. He first poured it into his body, then put the clear flower pellet into his mouth. This was another rare opportunity for Xiaohua to cultivate. After the closed-door cultivation, Xiaohua carefully and stingily refined the earth crystal yao milk, while taking some medicinal pills. After stabilizing his cultivation base at the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, he slowly pushed his cultivation base to a higher level. At the same time, in his spare time, Xiaohua was still refining pills. After a few more failures, he successfully refined the clear flower pellet used by the middle stage of Foundation establishment. Looking at the clear flower pellet that didn't have any medicinal fragrance, Xiaohua bitterly smiled. This clear flower pellet had tortured him enough in the past. It was like a flying sword hanging over his head, ready to take his life at any time. But it was also this clear flower pellet that sent him to the Imperial Thunder Sect, which led to all the things that happened afterwards. Xiaohua understood that Yu Chen must have come to visit him and arranged for him to go to Meng country through Mo Zhao Black Forest. Seeing Xiaohua open the restriction and let the transmission talisman in, Xue Xue wanted to say something but hesitated. She had seen Xiaohua's abnormal state when he was cultivating before, so she didn't dare to disturb his cultivation too much this time. However, Xiaohua's abnormal state this time was different from before. This time, Shui couldn't help but watch with concern. What kind of abnormality was this? A multicolored thread emerged from the back of Xiaohua's head. It circled around the alchemy room and immediately turned into countless threads. They passed through the alchemy furnace, passed through the alchemy liquid, passed through everything and scattered outside. Then, many more threads came back, passed through Xiaohua's body, and came out again. When Shui finished cultivating, she didn't see any movement from Xiaohua. When she came to the alchemy room, the multicolored threads had already turned into a huge cocoon of light, surrounding Xiaohua. How could this not shock Shui? Several transmission talismans were out of Xiaohua's expectations. In addition to Yu Chen's, there was also one from a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect's Daoist Master Miyu. There wasn't much content in it, only that Daoist Master Miyu was leaving Haoming City to return to the Imperial Thunder Sect. If there were disciples who had finished their experiential learning, they could follow Daoist Master Miyu back to the sect. Xiaohua didn't care about this message. After all, it was already half a year ago. However, this message was a rule of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Any ordinary disciple who received this transmission talisman would definitely be full of glory and eagerly go to Daoist Master Miyu to register to return to the sect, because this was an excellent opportunity to get close to a nascent soul cultivator. Thinking about how Xiaohua could casually give Bai Fengliang a foundation establishment pill, then wouldn't a nascent soul cultivator be able to casually give foundation establishment and golden core cultivators different benefits? This was also because Daoist Master Miyu saw Xiaohua appear in the auction for nascent soul cultivators, so she ordered her disciple to send this transmission talisman. Otherwise, how could an early foundation establishment disciple like Xiaohua receive this transmission talisman? Alas, this opportunity was also lost by Xiaohua. Chapter 2078. Yu Chen's messaging talisman was even simpler. He came several times, but Xiaohua didn't respond. He also understood that Xiaohua should be in seclusion, so he didn't disturb him. There were many cultivators going to Inkcloud Black Forest, so he could arrange things more freely if Xiaohua left later. Xiaohua looked at several messaging talismans, then sent out Yu Chen's messaging talisman, and then asked Shui, "Wife, how's your cultivation method? If it's successful, I'll accompany you to Haoming City to build your foundation. Otherwise, I have an appointment with Captain Yu, so we have to set off for QC." Shui didn't hesitate at all and said with a smile, "I don't know why. I always have some lingering thoughts that this isn't the best time to build my foundation. Even the cultivation method you gave me has improved a little. I've already decided, so let's talk about it on the way." "It's up to you." Xiaohua said with a smile, "That cultivation method is beneficial to the meridians, so you'll have more confidence if you cultivate it for a few more years. Your foundation is different from mine, it's related to your life, so you have to be careful." Then, Xiaohua put away the pill furnace and other things, and Shui also put away the things she left in the cave. Not long after, Yu Chen came to the cave. As soon as he saw Xiaohua, he looked up and down, but he couldn't find any clues. Xiaohua's cultivation was still in the early stage of foundation establishment. However, Yu Chen still said with a smile, "Congratulations, fellow Daoist Xiao, you've been in seclusion for another year. Your cultivation must have improved a lot." Xiaohua didn't think so and waved his hand, saying, No, I'm just a foundation establishment cultivator. How can I improve after a year of seclusion? I'm just relying on my leisure time here to stabilize the realm I just set foot in." Yu Chen didn't ask any more and turned his head, saying, "Then, fellow Daoist Xiao, are you going to continue your seclusion? Or are you going to Inkcloud Black Forest?" If you're in seclusion. Hee, you have to give me the spirit stones for this cave first. The spirit stones you paid in advance for this cave are already not enough. Ha ha ha, seeing Yuchen joking, Xiaohua laughed and said, fortunately, fellow Daoist Yu is in Haoming City, or I would have been kicked out of the cave long ago. Ha ha ha, Yuchen also laughed. When Yuchen sat down, Xiaohua told him his plan. Yuchen nodded and said, everything has been arranged by this old man. Tomorrow, there will be a group of cultivators passing through the ink-cloud black forest. 10 days later, there will be another group of cultivators. Whatever fellow Daoist Xiao thinks is possible. Oh. Xiaohua was slightly taken aback. Yuchen was even more surprised than Xiaohua. He said curiously, the Mo Zhao Black Forest is full of dangers, not to mention the Mo Sand and Mo Zhao. Even the rarely seen giant Mo Zhao and golden silk armor Ho can appear at any time. If it is not a nascent soul realm senior, no one can say that they can pass through it safely. Even if there is a secret path, most foundation establishment cultivators travel in groups. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He scratched his head and said, please forgive me, Daoist Yu. This is the first time I've come to the ink-cloud black forest. I didn't know it was so strange. Hee, if fellow Daoist Xiao is alone, this old man will naturally tell you the location of the secret path. Yuchen said with a smile, but fellow Daoist Xiao also has a delicate junior sister. In this old man's opinion, you should go with others. I will listen to fellow Daoist Yu's instructions. Xiaohua had always been a person who went with the flow. Hearing Yuchen's advice, he naturally agreed casually. But then, Xiaohua's heart moved and he asked again, then, who are these two groups of cultivators? Yuchen said casually. When the time comes, my Haoming City's disciples will be responsible for sending you to the edge of the ink-cloud black forest. I won't be sending you off. I hope that the next time I see fellow Daoist Xiao will already have the same cultivation as me. Fellow Daoist Yu is joking. Xiaohua shook his head and said, it takes 30 years to go from early stage to mid-stage foundation establishment, and 60 years to go from mid-stage to late stage. How long has it been since I came back from Meng country? How can I catch up with fellow Daoist Yu? Ha ha ha, Yuchen laughed. Without saying anything else, he drank a few cups of spirit tea and left. This senior Yu already knows that my husband's cultivation is at mid-stage foundation establishment. Shui was somewhat surprised. After Yuchen left, she quietly asked. Yes, Xiaohua nodded slightly and said with a smile, if he didn't see my cultivation at mid-stage foundation establishment, how could he want to be on good terms with me? However, I really did get a lot from him. It seems that in the future, I'll have to make friends with cultivators of the same realm. 10 days later, somewhere in Haoming City, Xiaohua and Shui, dressed in camouflage, arrived in front of a dozen or so cultivators. The person in the lead was a city guard around the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. After Xiaohua handed the jade slip to the city guard looked at it and saluted very respectfully. Greetings, seniors. Yes. Xiaohua raised his hand and said, I'm not late, right? This group doesn't seem to be here yet. Senior, please no, the city guard said respectfully. The disciples of Mount Jinhua and the two seniors aren't here yet, but the others are. Senior, please wait a moment. When the time comes, I can immediately lead the seniors to ink-cloud black forest. All right. Xiaohua nodded and turned his head to the side, ignoring the city guard. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, about 5 or 6 aura refining cultivators quickly walked over. Xiaohua's eyes brightened. Sure enough, as Yuchen said, the ones in the lead were the elders of Mount Jinhua. However, it wasn't just one, but two. Xiaohua just happened to know these two. One of the elders was Skyward Pavilion's Fu Feng. The other was guest elder Lu Yun. The current Lu Yun was quite different from when Xiaohua first met her. Her hair was completely white, and the wrinkles on her face had increased. However, the only thing that hadn't changed was her plain robe. Looking at Fu Feng again, he was a male cultivator after all. His hair and beard were still white, and he couldn't see any special changes. Of course, the two of them still had one thing that didn't change, which was their 12th layer aura refining cultivation. Alas, seeing that the two people who were previously high up didn't make any progress in their cultivation, Xiaohua inwardly sighed. I've been following the wind and the current smoothly. I haven't thought about it for a long time. How many cultivators are there on Dawn Rain Continent, and how many can step into Foundation Establishment? And how many can step into Core Formation? Cultivation is really too difficult. I came late. Please forgive me, fellow Daoist. Fu Feng walked at the very front. When he saw Haoming City's city guard, he promptly smiled apologetically. The city guard didn't have the respect he had when he saw Xiaohua, but he also didn't have any intention of looking down on him. He faintly smiled and said, Elder Fu, don't be anxious. The time hasn't come yet. There are still two more fellow Daoists. Fu Feng knew that Jinhua Mountain was nothing in the eyes of Haoming City. In any case, he was an elder and still needed to protect Jinhua Mountain's face. Thus, he cupped his hands and casually walked to Xiaohua's side. After waiting for several Jinhua Mountain disciples to stand still, Xiaohua smiled again. Wasn't the one standing behind Fu Feng precisely another old acquaintance of his? That's Skyward Pavilion's Fu Shan. At this time, Fu Shan was already middle-aged, and his cultivation had also stepped into the 9th layer of aura refining. He could still be distinguished from his appearance. How interesting! Xiaohua inwardly laughed. I haven't seen a Jinhua Mountain disciple for a long time. I almost forgot about him. I didn't expect to meet him here all of a sudden. I wonder what a Jinhua Mountain disciple wants to do through Inkcloud Black Forest. Thinking up to here, Xiaohua suddenly quivered and came to a realization. Damn it, I understand now. Didn't I see him before? It seems he wants to go to Meng through the transportation formation. I don't have time to look for him, but Jinhua Mountain will meet. Jinhua Mountain must have obtained information about him and went to look for him. Only this way can Jinhua Mountain send two elders. Thinking of the coincidence, Xiaohua naturally thought of the twin talisman jades and talisman puppets that were like flowers and moons, as well as the talisman puppets that lost their lives for love. Alas, I wonder how the coincidence is now. Does he know that his whereabouts have already been exposed? Xiaohua slightly wrinkled his brows. After all, he still had the talisman refining method on him and some cultivation methods that he had promised to temporarily keep. Xiaohua had long since had no use for these things, but he had no choice but to return the coincidence. And it's better to return the coincidence. Xiaohua very simply made a decision. At this time, the last two enchanting cultivators also came. These two cultivators took out the jade slips. After the city guard examined them, they quietly stood to the side and didn't say anything. Xiaohua's divine sense swept through the two cultivators' enchanting cloaks. He couldn't see their true faces, but he already knew that they were at least Foundation Establishment. This was because Xiaohua currently possessed core formation strength. As long as the cultivation of qi condensation was below the 12th layer, the enchanting cloak couldn't obstruct his inspection. Chapter 2079. Strange, Xiaohua had Yu Chen's warning in advance, so he was very careful. When he saw the two cultivators, he couldn't help but think of Qiu Mingwei and Liao Xianlan. After all, he had refined talismans with Liao Xianlan on Jinhua Mountain and had seen the grudges between the Fu family and the Liao family. However, now that he thought about it, Qiu Mingwei had already made it clear that he wanted to stand up for Liao Xianlan, but because of Xiaohua, the foundation establishment cultivators of the three sects came together and forced Xiaohua to flee. Now that so many years had passed, there should be an end to it. Liao Xianlan and Qiu Mingwei might not be thinking about the Fu family. Of course, the most important thing was that Liao Xianlan was only in the 5th layer of qi refining at that time. Xiaohua didn't think that she could surpass Shui and reach foundation establishment in one fell swoop. It's better if it's not the Liao family of Gung Mountain. Xiaohua thought to himself. This way, I won't have to get involved in the grudges between the two families. This kind of scheming and deceit is everywhere in the Xiaoyu continent. I don't want to get involved in it. When the last two cultivators appeared, the city guard of Haoming City checked the jade slip and immediately led Xiaohua and the others out of the city. He escorted them all the way to the edge of the ink shadow black forest, where there was an extremely secretive secret path, before he turned around and left. This secret path was obviously different from the one Xiaohua had taken before. It was very close to the ground, and his divine sense was abnormally stable. Fellow Daoist Xiao, please. Fu Feng said very politely to Xiaohua. The distance between Haoming City and Incloud Black Forest was not short, and it was enough for Xiaohua to get close to Fu Feng. Fu Feng knew that there was nothing in Jinhua Mountain that anyone coveted except for talismans, so he wasn't afraid of Xiaohua's probing. Although he was a little vigilant, he was still very polite to this cultivator. After all, it was good for him to not provoke or befriend a cultivator. Xiaohua glanced at the people around him. In addition to the two cultivators in camouflage, there were 3 cultivators in the early stage of foundation establishment. The other 20 or so cultivators were around the 11th layer of qi refining. So he said to the 2 cultivators, "Fellow Daoist, how should I address you?" "My surname is Qiu." The man raised his voice and replied, "I understand what fellow Daoist Xiao means. However, I am here to travel with my beloved concubine and have no time to care about other matters. I bid my farewells." With that, the cultivator clasped his hands and grabbed the other cultivator. The 2 of them flew into the secret passage. Surname Qiu. Beloved concubine. Xiaohua stared blankly. He'd already excluded Qiu Mingwei from the list, but this cultivator actually declared himself to be surnamed Qiu, which sounded very similar to Qiu Mingwei's surname. Could it really be Qiu Mingwei? Xiaohua pondered for a moment, but then shook his head. This young master is overthinking things. This fur coat might be Qiu, or it might be Qiu. It might not be Qiu Mingwei's fur coat. Moreover, it's impossible for Liao Xianlan to dual cultivate with Qiu Mingwei. After all, the difference in age and cultivation between the 2 is too great. Fortunately, the other 3 foundation building cultivators also brought their own aura refining disciples. They were actually willing to cooperate with Xiaohua and pass through the secret passage together. Therefore, after some slight arrangements, everyone flew into Incloud Black Forest. This time, it was different from when Xiaohua entered the forest. The purpose of this trip was only to pass through. Moreover, this secret passage had been inspected by Haoming City, and many cultivators had passed through it safely in the past few years. Even before entering Incloud Black Forest, the disciples of Haoming City had already explained many things to take note of. Therefore, more than a month later, at the other end of Incloud Black Forest, when Xiaohua hurriedly flew out of Incloud Black Forest, the people of Mount Jinhua, the 3 foundation building cultivators and their disciples were already safely waiting outside. As soon as they saw Xiaohua fly out, the 3 foundation building cultivators flew up and bowed. "Senior, thank you for your help. If you weren't here today, we would all be buried in the mouth of ink cloud." Xiaohua, who was flying in the air, had a bitter smile on his face. It was not a big deal at first, but when they were about to reach the end of the secret path, an ink shao suddenly appeared. Everyone knew how powerful this ink shao was. Even golden core cultivators had to retreat, so how could a group of foundation establishment cultivators withstand it? One by one, they fled like monkeys scattering when the tree fell. Their escape was not a big deal, but Ink Cloud, who seemed to be lost and even leisurely strolling, became interested and chased after them. Xiaohua had no choice but to tell Shui to stay behind and lead Ink Cloud to another place. Finally, he used the earth escape technique to escape from the black forest. "It's okay," Xiaohua said with a smile. "It's fate that we are going the same way. It's not a big deal for me to help you." Seeing Xiaohua's indifferent demeanor, the 3 foundation building cultivators were very embarrassed. They all smiled apologetically and said, "We didn't know your cultivation level, senior. Along the way, we were slow. Please forgive us." "Ha, the ignorant are not guilty." Xiaohua waved his hand. "If it weren't for this ink cloud, I wouldn't have let you know my cultivation level." The 3 foundation building cultivators looked at each other and smiled apologetically. "We are cultivators from Meng Kingdom. May I invite you to our sect for a chat?" "No need," Xiaohua said with a smile. "I'm just traveling around. I don't want to get into trouble." However, after he finished speaking, he had a thought and asked, "I came to Meng Kingdom to ask you about something." "Please ask, senior," the 3 said respectfully. "There is a cultivation family in the south of Meng Kingdom. They might be good at refining. Do you know which family it is?" Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked by accident. "Ha, senior asked the right person." One of the cultivators bowed and said, "I am Miao Yan from the Miao family in Meng Kingdom's Qi City. Qi City is in the south of Meng Kingdom, close to the Qiu Sea. As far as I know, there are 2 famous refining families. One is the Fei family in Jiqing, and the other is the Qin family in Fan City. I wonder which family is senior looking for?" This. Xiaohua was speechless. He didn't know whether the cultivator holding the gold leaf in the auction in Chiu's city could refine or not. However, if he asked the families in the south of Meng Kingdom, he wouldn't have any clues. Seeing that Xiaohua was silent, Miao Yan said with a smile, "If senior is interested, junior can accompany senior to Jiqing and Fan City. My Qi City's Miao family is somewhat famous in the south of Meng Kingdom. It won't be difficult to find a cultivation family." If it wasn't for the matter of Mount Jinhua, Xiaohua naturally would have followed Miao Yan. However, seeing that the Jinhua mountain elder and Qiu Mingwei had also come to Meng Kingdom, he was afraid that they would all rush over. How could he give up? Therefore, Xiaohua said with a smile, "Forget it. Now that I have something to do, let's wait for the future." "All right." Miao Yan clapped his hands and took out his communication talisman. He respectfully handed it over and said, "This is Junior's communication talisman. If Senior comes to Qi City, please inform Junior. Junior will do his best." "Good." Xiaohua accepted it with a smile. Miao Yan was also happy. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.